You're listening to the Common Descent Podcast.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, world, and welcome to another Patron mini-episode compilation. This is a thing we do from time to time here at the Common Descent Podcast because we have a bunch of great patrons who support our science communication and podcasting efforts on our Patreon. And one of these list of ways that we give back and thank our patrons is at certain levels by doing mini-episodes on a topic of their choosing. These are tons of fun. We get to talk about a whole bunch of topics in addition to the discussions that we have in the main podcast. And it's a lovely way for us to give something to our supporters on Patreon. And then, every now and then after we've done a bunch of these, we like to put them together into a little public anthology to put out for everybody to hear. And this is the fifth one of those.
Yeah, we've done a bunch of these, and they've been tons of fun.
So if you don't know how these work, well, go listen to the other, there's a whole bunch of them. You can listen to a whole bunch of these. You're going to hear our series of mini-episodes on the following topics for the following people. T-Rex for Sam, Okapis for Sarah May, Cicadas for Danielle, Ants for Robert, Polychaetes for Joshua, and Pangolins for KitKat Katja.
Yeah, a good group of weird animals.
Thanks, as always, to our top-tier patrons for their support, and thanks to all of our patrons, and indeed all of our listeners everywhere, for supporting the podcast. That's enough intro. On to the mini-episodes.
Enjoy!
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, Sam. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon.
Yeah!
As thanks, as expected, here is your very own mini-episode on an animal of your choosing, and the animal that you have chosen is, as you said, your favorite dinosaur, Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That's a very fitting answer to your favorite.
It's a good, it's funny. We talked about this in the Tyrannosaurus episode. It's such a cliche,
Yeah.
It feels like. And, like, if you've ever been in a room full of children and asked who's your favorite dinosaur, the fact that just half the room is going to say T-Rex. But also,
Yeah, absolutely.
of course that's your favorite. T-Rex is super awesome.
Well, it's like, when I'm asked, I don't say T-Rex is my favorite. But I have more T-Rex stuff than I do any other dinosaur.
Yeah.
Because if you give me the choice, I'm going to go, well, I mean, I'm going to take the T-Rex. Like, I'm not crazy.
And also, like, as a paleontologist, I have never studied T-Rex or indeed dinosaurs. I have never done any research about dinosaurs. I have excavated dinosaur stuff. But, like, I know a bunch of stuff about T-Rex.
Yeah.
Just from the osmosis of being in It's like I grew up in the U.S. so I can speak some Spanish.
Yeah.
It just happened. It just got in there
Yes.
because of where I am. I am trained as a paleontologist, and I educate about fossils, so I know a bunch of stuff about T-Rex.
Yep. Well, and T-Rex falls into that interesting category of it's the famous, one. It's the famous big theropod. And also one of our best preserved. Like,
Yeah.
we have a lot of good specimens of it compared to a lot of others. So it's that 1-2 punch of you became very popular, and we can learn more about you than we can the average dinosaur.
Yeah, we actually do have a bunch of information. And T-Rex is often sort of the representative of theropod dinosaurs, but it's also an odd theropod dinosaur.
Yeah, it really is.
It's unusually big, and its proportions are weird. Like, T-Rex's skull is very different alongside other tyrannosaurs, and even in comparison to other tyrannosaurs in some ways. It's a very distinctive, unique dinosaur. I often find myself, I'll be online or at a museum or something, and I'm a paleontologist. I see skulls and fossil bones all the time. And if I'm walking through, like, the Smithsonian or something and I see a bunch of skulls, I generally have an idea of what those skulls are. But when I see a T-Rex skull, I go, oh, a T-Rex skull.
Yep.
It is an extremely distinctive... Often I'm surprised myself. I go,
Yes.
a T-Rex skull. And then I go, is it? Are you sure it's not like Albertosaurus or something weird? And then I check the panel and no, it's a T-Rex. Because,
Yep.
that is a very distinctive skull, the image of which is burned into my brain.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the things that stands out to me, because like one of the notable famous things is the teeny tiny arms.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times that's just become a joke, and we're all familiar with it, so it's not a big deal is not made of. It's just, yeah, tiny arms, we can laugh about it. But it wasn't until I was older and actually learned more about dinosaur diversity to go, no, those actually are really distinct.
Yeah.
Like, those are, compared to the rest of the body, very, very unusually small. Like, no, we should be talking about that.
Yeah, that's weird.
That's not just silly, that's weird.
T-Rex is this, it's in this really fascinating place. Because as you said, it's the famous theropod. T-Rex is probably the most famous extinct species of all time.
I mean, I would be baffled if anything else could actually rival it.
Like maybe like Neanderthals or something. But even then, T-Rex is...
It's one of those where maybe Neanderthals, but typically they're just called cavemen. So only kind of.
T-Rex gets a...
Yes.
Well, T-Rex, and I think we've mentioned this before, I often find it really interesting that T-Rex is one of an extraordinarily short list of animals for which the average human being walking around knows their binomial name.
Yes.
Like Tyrannosaurus Rex, probably the most famous scientific name alongside Homo sapiens.
Yep.
Like, people know the name Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yes, because like knowing the first part, is very common with dinosaurs because we don't have common names for dinosaurs like we do with living animals.
Triceratops, Stegosaurus. Yeah. They don't have. It's not the western yellow-throated, horned, blah blah blah.
Exactly. But if I ask someone, okay, but no, which Triceratops? They'd go Triceratops.
Yeah. What do you mean?
It's like no, which one?
Which species?
Which species? Triceratops. Yeah, no, Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yes.
Is the full scientific name.
It doesn't hurt that Tyrannosaurus Rex is an awesome name.
It's so good.
Well done.
Oh.
Good. Osborne, I think? Is that right? I'll check. You keep talking.
Yeah.
I think it was Osborne who did it.
Well, and also, like, one of the things that is super fun with T-Rex is, like, T.Rex. That is how we abbreviate scientific names when you're talking about them in a study.
Yes.
Because writing the entire thing is very lengthy.
Yeah. When we abbreviate the genus to the capital first letter, period, and then all lowercase species epithet. That is the official correct way to write. Capital T dot space lowercase rex T-Rex.
And we do that especially when you're like talking about a group and you're like, all right, here are the various species of this monkey. So we're going to be talking about these different species, but they all have the same genus name because they're all in the same genus. So it will be easier to read if it's just the capital letter and then the species epithet.
And we do that like T. horridus for Triceratops, S. stenops for Stegosaurus. You'll see that a lot.
It is so it's so fantastic to me that is the official boring scientific method for abbreviating the name, but it ended up being T-Rex.
Yes.
So everyone knows it. So once again, not only does the full common name gets used, but the correct abbreviation of that full name also gets used.
Yeah.
Just all the time.
It's often hyphenated.
It is.
Which is technically incorrect.
Yeah, well, that's the nickname.
Yes, the nickname. T-Rex. But yeah, like you are unknowingly using the actual scientific name of this animal, which is pretty darn cool. That level of fame and notoriety has also made T-Rex one of the... In the messages... Sam mentioned the debate recently about how many species of Tyrannosaurus. Like, are they in fact all Rex? Mm-hmm. There was a study that came out a little while ago that suggested it may be reasonable to split into 3 different species across North America, which generated all sorts of arguing on the internet, in which some paleontologists said sure, and then a bunch of paleontologists said no, that seems like it's probably over splitting of stuff.
Yep.
And I remember at the time seeing a bunch of discussion online with paleontologists who were saying, so the paper came out and it said, we looked at Tyrannosaurus skeletons from across North America and our analysis found anatomical differences in these different regions that we suggest could be considered distinct species. They also went as far as to propose names for those species, which isn't always done in studies like that. But I saw discussions online where people were like, the thing that they did is done for living and fossil animals all the time.
Yeah.
Like that question of, oh, hey, we found some differences. Could these be different species?
Absolutely.
But it was T-Rex. So the whole internet blew up about it.
All of paleo Twitter.
All of paleontology social media went, all right, I guess this is what we're talking about.
Yep.
Because someone did a relatively mundane sort of run-of-the-mill analysis of a diverse genus, but it was T-Rex.
Yep.
So that T-Rex just spawns these discussions.
Well, and it is a very fascinating kind of microcosm of different views on paleontology and approaches. Because, like, on one hand, T-Rex is a fantastic tool for teaching paleontology because no one that I've ever met looks at T-Rex and goes,
whatever.
Overrated. No. Like,
well,
even if it's...
there are people who...
Oh, yes.
But, like, it's hard to be bored.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, it's not that it might be overstudied. It might be... But everyone appreciates it. Everyone goes, no, that is a cool dinosaur.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And so, like, you are going to be able to get attention. You're going to be able to elicit interest. But then on the flip side, you do get the overhype. Mm-hmm. Where it now has a fan following.
It's a celebrity
It's a
dinosaur.
celebrity. So people feel personal about, did you just suggest that T-Rex had lips?
Right.
We're going to go fight out in the parking lot. Like, it is emotion tied up with it because it's such a charismatic dinosaur and was part of so many people's introductions to paleontology as, kids and young people.
And I think that it's really fascinating to me how many times the question has come up of how many T-Rex is there? Mm-hmm. Like, are there different species? There's the whole Nanotyrannus discussion of, is this its own distinct thing or is this a juvenile of T-Rex? And part of that comes down to just how much study this particular species of fossil animal gets. But also part of it comes back to the thing that you pointed out earlier. We have a bunch of T-Rex.
Yes.
It is a surprisingly commonly found dinosaur. There's tons of skeletons. T-Rex is also one of those interesting ones where a lot of fossils are found all over the world. It is not uncommon for fossils to get names. It is quite uncommon for fossils to get names that, like, the general populace comes to know.
If I say Sue the T-Rex, a lot of people are going to go, okay, yeah, Sue.
That's a famous dinosaur. You've got Sue, and you've got Stan, and you've got all the other ones. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of... there are celebrity... Not like like Barney the dinosaur in Godzilla, but like actual dinosaur.
A single individual of this real species.
Sue is a real T-Rex who is famous, who has a Twitter following and is hyper famous. That is such a weird position for a fossil animal to be in.
Yeah, like Lucy and stuff. Like, there's really only a couple of others that I can even think of that have actual, like, there's locally ones of, like,
oh sure,
if you visit this museum you probably know this one that has been named.
And there are specimens that are famous. Like, when you think of Archaeopteryx, most of the time you're thinking of the famous specimen of Archaeopteryx.
Yes,
but it's not a name.
No.
You don't know the name and designation of that very commonly.
Yes, exactly. So it is, T-Rex is a phenomena when it comes to fossil organisms and their public perception.
Yeah.
And very much rightly so, because it's the same reason we get obsessed with great white sharks and stuff of, like, this is an impressive animal that would have been a keystone aspect of its environment. Like, this animal is a big deal. Yes. It would have been a big deal when it was alive. You would have known if you were in an environment where one of these was present because it would have shaped the environment around itself. It's like elephants and giant predators. It is a big deal.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, but yeah, it is fascinating how much of a life it has taken on for itself.
It's funny because there is this sort of trope of T-Rex being brought up in communicating science, that if you're talking about ancient life, somehow T-Rex is going to come up. And like, there are tons of examples of headlines where it's like, new fossil predator was the T-Rex of its ecosystem. And it's like, all right, that's a crab.
Yep.
That's a little bit of a weird thing to call it a T-Rex of its ecosystem. Or like there'll be a study about lips, and the study will be like, yeah, we looked at 12 different dinosaurs to determine whether or not they may have had lips covering their teeth. And then the headline says, T-Rex had lips, according to new study. T-Rex garners that attention. But also, we will do it in our science communication. And sometimes it's very much like, yeah, if you're like, oh, this is a cool animal, lived at the same time and place as T-Rex. All right, I got your attention. But I'll notice we'll do it on the podcast a lot, also in reference to just stuff that is best demonstrated by T-Rex.
Yes.
Like when we talk about ontogenetic niche partitioning, the idea that as an individual animal goes through its lifespan, it is occupying different ecological roles, different positions within its ecosystem. The two examples that we tend to very commonly give for that are crocodiles and T-Rex.
Yeah.
Because that is a really cool thing about this species that we actually have direct fossil evidence to support.
Yes. Well, it's like another one that I see come up very commonly in, articles for and just mentioning about different animals is like bite force. Mm-hmm. T-Rex will come up in that, and that on the surface could very easily seem like you chose a cool toothy predator to talk about bite force. Right. No. There's a reason. T-Rex likely had one of the strongest bite forces of any animal that's ever been on the planet.
Yes.
It is adapted for a particularly strong bite. So that is actually something unique about it, not just using its fame.
Yes.
You should mention T-Rex if you're talking about incredible bite forces.
And it's one of the fun things about communicating science with a dinosaur like T-Rex is teasing those things apart of like, okay, yeah, sometimes T-Rex is brought up just as a generic example or just as an attention getter. And I'm not even saying that that's even a bad approach. Say T-Rex and you've got people's attention.
That gets the PR job done.
Put T-Rex on the cover of the book and people are going to read that book. I totally get it. But then also, there's really awesome science to be explored specifically about T-Rex.
Yes.
It isn't just the famous member of its group of dinosaurs. It's very unique and very distinct in its own right. And I think that one of the things that has really emerged out of the fame of T-Rex is that it is probably the most commonly and widely depicted dinosaur.
Yes.
In like when we reconstruct in movies and in documentaries and stuff like that. And on the one hand, it means that T-Rex is absolutely overused and stuff.
Yes.
And it gets tons of exposure, and you have these just wildly varying depictions of this species. But on the other hand, it means that there is more interesting diversity and variation in how we've depicted this one species than any other dinosaur. There are so many examples of fossil animals where there is one depiction of it.
Yeah.
Like this fossil animal was in one documentary or one famous painting or whatever, and now that's kind of become, this is how we think of this animal, or this is how people who have seen this think of it. And that has absolutely happened with T-Rex. There have been very famous depictions that have really skewed our way that we envision the animal.
Well, it's the reason that in lots of video games and things, the roar is real similar to Jurassic Park and things like that.
But also, if you wanted a sample of like varying ways that paleo artists could depict a single species, T-Rex is an incredible case study for that. Well, there are so many different versions of what T-Rex might have been like across movies and documentaries and stuff.
I think one of my favorite examples I saw of that was a joke piece of paleo art after Prehistoric Planet came out, and the male T-Rex that was with the chicks got a lot of attention because it was a thicker, chunkier depiction of T-Rex than we had typically seen. It was also a male showing parental care, which was unique.
Yeah,
and so lots of people were calling it like dad bod T-Rex and stuff like that. But it was an art of that T-Rex, the skull-faced T-Rex from whatever it was.
Dinosaur Revolution?
Revolution, I think.
Is that one?
And then a couple of other notable T-Rexes from other documentaries and movies and shows. And it was like they were all having a barbecue together, was the joke. Mm-hmm. But it was one of those like, they didn't label them. Right. I looked at it and I went, oh yeah, no, I know these T-Rexes you're showing me. And that's kind of cool that you can see a T-Rex and you get a feeling of, I know what time period that's from. I know what that was used in. There's tons of dinosaurs where you can watch the transition throughout their paleo art, a presentation and how they've been depicted. But like T-Rex has just this beautiful gradient as it's gone through that you can really just watch, and it's fascinating.
I actually have an example of this that I just remembered. I was recently in beautiful British Columbia, and I went to the Royal BC Museum, and they had a traveling Sioux exhibit. And around the Sioux exhibit, there were all different depictions of T-Rex, which is super cool. They had the full replica of Sioux's skeleton. They had the full reconstruction of the actual body. They had a bit of Charles R. Knight art showing early depictions of T-Rex. And then there was some art that I assume was original to this exhibit. And I took some pictures of it because there was a thing in the art that stood out to me. That I saw the art and I went, huh. And I'm going to show Will live on this recording. I'm going to show you this art and see if the thing that caught my attention catches your attention.
Oh, slit pupils.
Slit pupils!
Interesting, yeah.
There was no editing in that, by the way.
Yeah,
that was Will's initial immediate reaction. And I saw it and I stared at it and I realized I've never seen T-Rex depicted.
Same.
With like the cat pupil slits. Or if I have, not in any way that stuck in my memory.
That I remember.
And I stared at it for a bit and I went, I can't argue that that's like...
unrealistic.
Yeah, I guess it could.
Yeah.
I've just never seen that before. Which was... To this day, every now and then, see like very prominent paleo art of T-Rex with a different take on it that I had not considered before.
Well, it's like one figure I have of T-Rex, which is a feathered, fully on feather, not just like fuzzy, but full. The entire back is covered in feathers. The rest of it is mostly scaly, but it's got a back covering, and they gave it kind of the tail plume that often we have shown with Velociraptor and a lot of smaller dromaeosaurs of having like a plumage on the end of the tail that is not tail fan like birds have, but
just a little poof,
longer feathers there than further up. And I saw that and had that same moment of, if we're considering how they might have had feathers, why not?
Yeah.
And it had that same moment of interesting. That had not been entered into my brain as an option.
Yeah. It makes T-Rex this unique one species testing ground for paleo artistic ideas and also scientific study outside of paleo art. T-Rex has become, we talked about it, I think in the Tyrannosaurus episode, that I've seen T-Rex referred to as an extremely rare example of a fossil model organism.
Yes, exactly.
Like, this is the animal on which we test a bunch of stuff. We test artistic depictions, we test scientific analyses, and then extrapolate from there to other organisms. It puts it at this very unique position.
Well, and as we mentioned, because it has such a good preservation to its fossil record, there's things we can talk about with it that typically just are never going to come up with another group. Like, we've done studies on the senses of T-Rex because we have a lot of endocasts to see what their brain was like.
Yeah.
So, like, I've not heard lengthy discussions of any other dinosaur sense of smell. I've heard many discussions onto what the sense of smell capabilities likely were for T-Rex because we have its olfactory lobe of the brain preserved in the brain case, and we can look at the nasal passage and go, no, it probably had a really impressive sense of smell and could pinpoint things long distance because of the anatomy it had. Like, that's a discussion we don't get to have with most other dinosaurs.
Yep. And
it is... there's something so engaging when we can have a discussion that typically is only relegated to living organisms.
Yes.
That's really, really fantastic and just captivating.
And it all comes together to make this species just really uniquely positioned as a science ambassador.
Yes.
Of sorts. Between scientists for scientific study, also between scientists and non-scientists who are interested in learning.
Well, it's nice that we have a popular dinosaur that also we can have lots of examples to introduce you to different aspects of science. So it's I'm not trying to get you interested in the idea of ontogeny with a dinosaur you've never heard of before.
Right.
You know, I can introduce you to the idea of like growth series and how that helps us study it with T-Rex. So we get to talk about T-Rex and baby T-Rex, and that's just winning conversation.
I think you could, and I bet somebody does do this, do an entire paleontology, like semester-long paleontology class about T-Rex.
Right.
And just hit all the... All right, now we're going to talk about biomechanics and how we study that.
Today's example will
also
be...
Today's example, T-Rex. We're going to talk about ontogeny. Today's example, T-Rex. We're going to talk about splitting and lumping of species and how we distinguish different species or put them all as one species. Today's example, T-Rex.
Nanotyranna.
It's a very cool animal.
Yeah.
I have never been able, as popular a position as it can be, to scoff at T-Rex is everyone's favorite is T-Rex. I've never been able to begrudge anybody who says their favorite, because I completely get it.
There's a reason I have a shelf of Lego T-Rex.
Yes.
When they came out with the giant Jurassic Park T-Rex, I did not have a moment of like, oh, come on. Like, haven't we done this? I was like, I need it now.
Yeah. Well, and even in like Prehistoric Planet, where it was like, and also we're going to feature a bunch of scenes centering around T-Rex. And I have that reaction of like, okay, another documentary that is very prominently focusing on T-Rex, even though there are a bunch of other animals out there that you could focus on. I reckon, okay, I mean, it could be other ones, but you've chosen to do T-Rex, that's fine. And then also, show me the T-Rex scenes.
Yes, please.
I would love to see those T-Rex scenes, because it's going to be super cool, because... Yeah, it's T-Rex, and it's hard to get bored of seeing T-Rex do stuff.
Well, it's kind of how I felt when the question came of, like, what was my favorite croc? And I was like, I mean, saltwater crocodile. It's the biggest, but it also is the widest ranging, and it's the only one that travels extensively out in the ocean. And, like, it is a very cool animal that also has all the cliche reasons for me to have picked it.
Yes. Well, and the other thing that's so cool about this species is that in addition to all that other stuff, I know we're going to keep learning more cool stuff.
Yes.
Like T-Rex is the model organism that ushers in entire new types of study on dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And it's just such a cool thing to have in our field of paleontology. So, like, there is a reason we keep always talking about T-Rex. There's a reason people keep studying it. The reason people keep studying it, which is part of why we keep having to talk about it, because people won't stop studying T-Rex. But also, when we do, we learn a whole bunch of cool stuff.
Yeah, it's never just useless research.
Right.
We did get something from it.
So, it makes a situation like this, where someone says, hey, talk about T-Rex. I always have that initial little bit of, on the one hand, what am I going to say about T-Rex?
Yeah.
Because we've talked about this animal so much. What more is there to say? But on the other hand, having the reaction of, yes, I could talk about T-Rex. What's my time limit?
Yeah.
Absolutely, we could do that.
Well, it's kind of got the Batman, Superman, Spider-Man situation of like, I mean, those are the most popular, and they are definitely focused on to the detriment of other really cool characters. But also, I mean, is there a new Batman animated thing coming out? I'll watch it. Is there a new Spider-Man movie? I'll watch it. Like, I mean, I'm not going to not watch it.
Right. So, great choice, Sam, of favorite dinosaur, and great choice of mini-episode discussion. If you'd like to hear us talk more about T-Rex, listen to the Tyrannosaurus episode. Right?
Yep.
And listen to the Tyrannosaurus episode, and also probably like at least one in every 10 episodes of the podcast.
Yes.
Where T-Rex comes up in some degree on the news or something.
It's a very slow-paced drinking game, but I bet.
Very cool animal. You will for sure hear us talk more about it in episodes in the future. Thank you for making this request. Thank you for giving us an excuse to geek out over the most famous dinosaur there is. And thank you, of course, for your wonderful support of us. And not only as a listener, but also as one of our higher level patrons. We greatly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much.
We hope you have enjoyed listening to us talk about T-Rex as much as we have enjoyed talking about T-Rex. And we hope that you enjoy it the next time we inevitably talk about T-Rex on the podcast. Thank you once again. We'll see you later.
Bye. Hello, David.
Hello, Will.
And hello, Sarah May. Thank you for your Patreon contributions and supporting us, and for your request of your own personal Patreon episode for your favorite animal. You chose the Okapi. And that's a great choice.
It is. We've mentioned the Okapi a handful of times on the episode. It has come up, honestly, it comes up more than I would have expected it to.
The Okapis, that's kind of one of the weird things about the Okapi. Like, if Okapis were more common, I feel like most people wouldn't pay much attention to them.
Because their thing is being weird and rare. That's what they're known for.
But when you actually just compare them to other, African herbivores, they're pretty in line with a lot of them. They do have some things that are peculiar to them, but they're kind of just like a tall antelope in a lot of other ways. So it's kind of odd that they have this weird reputation when they actually aren't that strange of an animal themselves.
Yeah. My experience with Okapis in that regard is just starting with having no idea what an Okapi is, and then eventually learning and going, oh, weird. There's like a weird, mysterious, rarely talked about. It's related to giraffes, and it's so cool. And then getting over that, and then realizing, it's basically like a gazelle.
It was just the normal version of a giraffe.
Kind of just does normal stuff. And then becoming accustomed to thinking of it that way, and then looking at an Okapi again and going, Okapis are weird.
Yep. Yeah.
The shape of an Okapi is weird. The head is weird. And I have personally experienced this back and forth on how weird or mundane I think an Okapi is.
Like, they are weird and unique, but not as weird and unique as you'd think they are just based on the reputation.
Yes.
And yeah, like, the way I think of them, especially after doing the giraffe episode, is an Okapi is just a baseline giraffe. Like,
yeah. This is what a giraffe would be like if it wasn't. This is the first evolutionary stage, Pokemon-wise.
Yes.
The giraffe is the weird, extreme end stage. The Okapi is just the normal thing.
Which is potentially, based off the fossil evidence, what an Okapi kind of is.
Right.
It may be the actual direct descendant of those earlier, shorter giraffe species that then split off into the tall giraffes. So the Okapi literally might be the remnants of early giraffe lineages.
Right.
That maintained the still tall, but not elongate body form. They have the much more modern... Because there's tall gazelles and there's other tall herbivores. Like a moose is a very tall...
Sure, camels are very tall.
They fall much more into that category of animal than the stretched out giraffe. But they've also still got some of the weird giraffe stuff. The one that's always stood out the most to me is their ossicones. Yep. So giraffes have the ossicones, which are different from horns and are unique because they are a bony protrusion covered in skin, but they don't have a horn core over it. It's just a bump on the head with tough skin on top, except the Okapis poke through the skin and are bony horns, but still no covering.
Yes.
Which makes them unlike everybody else's.
Very strange. Yeah, Okapi, I was trying to think of a comparison when you were describing, like, we have the giraffe, which is the famous thing, and it's totally unlike everything else, even other artiodactyls, even its other cousins. And then the Okapi is that weird, little discussed, normal relative of the giraffe, the link. And I was trying to think, because like you have things like elephants where we don't have that.
No.
We only have the super weird extreme thing. And then I realized Okapis are the tapers of giraffes.
Yeah.
Right? You've got rhinos and horses, which are very distinct, and then there's taper.
Yep.
And the taper is like, this is the ancestral condition. It is probably very much like what the ancestors of rhinos and horses look like. They're still around today. They're nowhere near as famous as their other relatives. And despite being the standard version of perissodactyls, they're super weird.
That's super bizarre.
Okapis feel a lot like that to me, where it's
Very
like,
much so.
You're not the weirdest member of your group, but by virtue of reputation, you're the oddball.
Well, and they've also got a little bit of the Mona Lisa thing going, where like, what made you famous is the story that led up to our...
Yes,
learning about you.
It's like coelacanths. And it's like, if it weren't for the story of coelacanths, you wouldn't be a famous fish. You'd just be a fish.
You'd be a scientifically notable one because you're
Yeah.
like, oh yeah, one of the few remaining lobe-fin fish. That's important.
Absolutely. Not the only one.
No.
We've got lungfish and stuff. But yeah, you're famous because of the story of discovery.
Yes. And I feel like okapis would fall into that category, but they were described before they were believed in.
Yes.
And then when they finally got discovered, it had that sensation of discovering a unicorn because that's how everyone was treating the description of it. Of like, no, you're wrong. There's not a half giraffe with a zebra butt.
Right.
That doesn't exist.
No.
And then, no.
Didn't I just tell you to quit making up
Yes,
animals?
Exactly. And, oh, no, here it is.
Here you go.
And so it gained that notoriety. But yeah, they are really interesting. They're also cool because they're like the alt lifestyle giraffe in that they're the forest giraffe.
And in fact, they are called that sometimes. The
Yep.
forest giraffe.
And that's another neat aspect. So it's like not only are you like the baseline, but you're also living very differently. You know, you're not just walking out alongside the giraffes. You are a different model.
Yes. I think okapis for me were one of the earliest examples of an animal species that I learned about that I took pride in knowing about.
Yep.
Because a lot of people did that feeling of like, have you ever heard of this animal? And that the word, like as a kid, learning that there's a lot of animals in the world, but they fall into general categories. So it's like, oh yeah, there's fish and there's birds and then there's crocodiles and there's snakes and lizards and whatever. And then every now and then coming across something and being like, oh, this is a specific thing.
Yes.
That a lot of people haven't heard of. This is it. The one other example that is popping into my head is a binturong.
Yeah.
Which was not one that I knew about as a kid, but for some reason, or like a Gila monster,
Or like I.
Yeah. Just like this weird thing, and it was you get that thrill of not discovery, but a little bit discovery. It's like, oh, there's a whole other big animal that I didn't know existed.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and like they've always been interesting to me from this perspective of even though we've now discovered them and like have them in zoos, like there are ones being taken care of by people, they still don't come up super often.
Like I said before, I've been surprised a little at how often okapis have come up on the podcast. They came up a bunch in the horns episode,
Yep.
Obviously in the giraffes episode, they were a big feature. But I think the earliest that okapis came up was in the cryptozoology episode.
Yes.
Because, like you said, that story that they have with them.
And if I remember right, the okapi is on the crest for one of the biggest cryptozoology communities.
Oh, interesting.
It is the signature animal because it was a cryptid.
Yep.
Like by the definition of a cryptid, for cryptozoology, a hidden creature that is known through word of mouth but has yet to actually be verified. That was the okapi.
Yes.
Now, once again, as is often the issue with cryptids, from the European white man perspective.
I was about to be like, yeah, we keep talking about the discovery. Oh, no one knew it existed.
Yeah. The word of mouth were the people who had seen the okapi.
Those were the mouths.
Yeah.
I don't actually know very much about the local sort of indigenous knowledge of okapis. I'm sure there are communities in the area who are just like, yeah, okapis.
Yeah.
Like, yes, that thing that lives here that we see all the time. I don't know very much about, like, I don't know if it holds a special cultural place in sort of the culture and the society of the people who live in those areas. But I'm sure it was this has happened again with tapirs.
Yes.
Where there have been examples of science making a discovery and then being responded to, or making the discovery because there were people from the area that went, yeah, if you go that way, you'll see some tapirs.
Yes.
That's where they live.
Well, it's like the platypus. We told the story that when it was first brought back to Europe, there was the whole thing of like, are you sure you're not trying to pull our legs? But it's like, no, there were ancient Australian stories.
Yes.
Cultural stories about the platypus because they were like, no, it's the platypus. It was a normal animal for them. So it's often very easy to forget that the story we have of the animals is the white European version of the story.
Yes.
And so it gained notoriety as a cryptid because it's one of the only big animals that has happened with, where it took it a while from being shared word of mouth to actually being entered into science books.
Yeah, because that's not where the science happened.
Yes, exactly.
You're in the forests far away from where all the scientists are.
Precisely.
Or the ones who are publishing in the popular books.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it has a very interesting reputation and history to the public understanding around the world of it. Yeah, they've also still got like the long giraffe tongue. So every now, like in my opinion, okapis are incredibly cute.
I think they're very pretty animals.
Yes, they're just like a painting. Like they've just got that nice gradient from solid dark brown to striped in the back.
Well, and they also have that short hair over a muscular body.
Yeah, that like pit bull, like
or like a racehorse that you often will see in things like gazelle and antelope. That is this very sort of satisfying,
like velvety almost.
Yeah.
No, they're very, very cool looking. And then every now and then you'll see a picture of them like lolling that big giraffe tongue out, and they're like, "Well, I forgot you have a slug in your mouth."
Yeah. Well, because you are a member of the giraffe family, and therefore you're a weirdo.
Yes, you're a very interesting version of an herbivore.
I was delighted that we got to do the giraffe episode and make it an okapi episode.
Yes.
And include, because every now and then we'll have animals like that are not very well known, sometimes not particularly well studied, that might not ever get an episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the podcast. But we get to include, like, giraffes is one, like, yeah, obviously people are going to request a giraffe episode. That's a famous group of animals. And for us to get to go, cool, surprise, this is an okapi episode also. They are part of that family. Now we get to talk about okapis, which is always a really nice angle to be able to take in an episode.
Yes, absolutely. Because it would be a shame if we didn't get to zoom in on them just because they aren't as well known or popular.
Yeah.
When there's still a ton of interesting stuff to say about them.
And it was really cool in the episode discussion about giraffes how central okapis are to the conversation about giraffe evolution.
Yes.
Like, this isn't just like a weird offshoot that is like, oh, and also technically this weird thing over here is part of the family and we don't know anything about it. No, this animal is a core part of our understanding of how giraffes evolved.
Well, it's that slight switch of perspective of the okapi is not a short giraffe. Giraffes are tall okapis.
Yes.
That's really what happened evolutionarily, and reframing it that way is important because it's very easy to get stuck on, as we often make the point, the familiar modern situation that the tall giraffes are the more common, more species, at least subspecies wise, rich group, and the one we know more about. So it's very easy to go, all right, so we've got that. Now we have this outlier one that's not like the rest. So how did we get from the common to here? No, that's not the way it happened historically. Yes. Today, the okapi is the weird one that's on its own, but that's what most of the giraffoid group looked like.
And it's also very satisfying in that standpoint because it makes it different from something like elephants.
Yes.
Where we look at elephants and you go, cool, what are they closest related to? Well, hyraxes and manatees.
That doesn't help.
No, that does not help me at all. That does not help me to understand the phylogenetic relationships and evolution of elephants. If anything, I'm more confused now.
Yep.
Giraffes, it's quite satisfying to be like, giraffes, what in the world? And then you go, well, they're cousins to okapis. And you go, oh, okay, that makes sense. That makes all the sense. Because an okapi looks like a short giraffe.
Yes.
That makes total sense. You go, yes, I see it. That is a very intuitive link between giraffes and the other artiodactyls.
Well, it's also very satisfying for me, and this is definitely a more like emotional response to just the species we have lost through the ages of Earth to extinction. There's always a little bit of that when you go, oh man, did you know that there used to be like moose giraffe with giant antler-shaped ossicones that were huge? That's awesome. A little sad they're not around. Like, a little sad I don't get to actually see one of those. It's nice that we do have a member of the moderately sized giraffids. And so, like, that's...
You hung around.
Yes. We still got to see one. before they all went away, before we only had tall ones left,
Right.
we got to see one.
Which is it's a perspective you don't always get.
Yes.
Like, so much of the time, you either have an elephant situation where they're just super weird, or you have a situation like with a moose. I was like, yeah, a moose that's an extreme weird animal, but its family is so diverse and widespread and speciose that a moose feels like a very natural part of that spectrum.
Well, surely, a group that has dominated almost the whole world would have a member like that.
It's just an extreme deer or elk.
It's like when you find about like a key deer, when it's like there's also super tiny deer.
Yeah,
Of course.
Sure.
There's going to be both ends.
The giraffe is a case where it is almost the elephant situation,
Yeah.
and we've got this one nice link. So yeah, an okapis are just very satisfying.
Yes, incredible.
I'm delighted to talk about okapis. I don't know a ton about okapis. Like, they're not my favorite animal or anything. But every time okapis come up in conversation, I'm a little happy. Like, oh yeah, wait, like a little feel like a little sibling.
Yes.
Like, way to go! I'm just how delightful.
Well, I feel like okapis are also a great lesson because they're forest animals, and we all know things live in the forest. That's what the forest is about, is a dense place of trees where tons of stuff is living. But I think it's very easy to forget that we still get distracted by the ones that are living out in the open.
Yep.
That there's tons of times where we go, no, there's this animal, but it doesn't leave the trees. And so if you don't go in to find it, you're not going to see it. Like the forest elephants, where it's like, there's whole groups of elephants that are specialized for living in the jungle. But that wasn't a common topic of discussion in like documentaries until fairly, recent, like the last couple decades, because they're not the ones you can see a mile away out on the savannah.
You see them from your plane.
Yes, exactly.
As you're flying over.
Like the tall giraffes are one of those where it's like you can just go out onto the savannah where there are giraffes and go, there's one, there's two.
Hard to miss them.
Yes. But in the forest, like, you could be next to an okapi, and unless it's making noise, you might not notice it.
Yeah.
Because that's their whole shtick.
Yes, because there's tigers in that forest, and it's important to be quiet.
Because forest animals are blending in. And so it is, I feel like a really good reminder that a lot of hidden animals are just in the places we're not looking.
Yes.
That we get distracted by the fact that the things above and outside the trees are not the only thing. Yes, they're going in and out, but there's also ones that never leave.
Yeah.
And the okapi's a big animal, but it stayed hidden because it was trying to.
Yeah. A very cool group of animals.
Yeah.
I hope they stick around.
Yes.
They're having trouble.
I would very much like to continue having okapis. So yeah, thank you, Sarah May, for requesting this neat animal.
A wonderful little discussion.
Good pick. Thank you so much for your support and for being one of our top Patreon members. We appreciate it so much and hope you enjoyed getting to hear us geek out about okapis.
Yeah, maybe they will come up again on the podcast someday.
Yeah, I'll find an excuse. Bye.
Bye. Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
And hello, Danielle, and welcome to your very own Patron mini episode. As you well know, because you're one of our top subscribers on Patreon, you get a mini episode where we will talk about a group of creatures of your choosing, and you have choosed cicadas.
Good choose.
Danielle's name on Patreon is Danielle the Bug Lover. So this is consistent.
That makes sense.
Cicadas. We don't get to talk about bugs nearly as much as bugs deserve us to talk about. Cicadas, very cool. I did bring up, cicadas, here's the thing about cicadas that I had not previously appreciated. Cicadas are a whole giant group of insects.
Yeah, they're actually way more common and widespread than I think a lot of people realize.
Yeah, the internet tells me that Cicadoidea is a whole superfamily. Cicadas.
Well, and they are more diverse, because I think that's definitely something that I ran into, because I did some brushing up, and I have a very particular idea of cicadas, but that's because I'm here in North America.
Yes, where we have some famous cicadas.
Yes, but they're different around, they do different things around the world. And so it seems like I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that happens, that each group of people have their own idea of what cicadas are like, because everyone pretty much has them.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not all behaving the same way.
Yeah. Did you grow up with cicadas?
Mm-hmm.
They have them down there?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep. I actually have, one time when I was at a camping trip when I was in Scouts, was a day where cicadas had come out recently.
Mm-hmm.
And so the trees were covered in the shed exoskeletons of their juveniles, their larvae, and there were cicadas screaming around and flying around.
I had looked up the range map,
Mm-hmm.
and it looked like the Georgia is about the southern edge of their range. I had cicadas growing up in New York, and so it was a very common feature to be like at summer camp and just have screaming cicadas. That was just a sound of summer.
Yeah. The thing that was really neat with my experience was that I'm pretty sure it was one of the groups that comes out every 13, 17
one
years.
of the periodical cicadas.
Because that was not a common occurrence. That did not happen. I was in Scouts for years going on mini camping trips out in the woods, and that was the only time that ever happened.
Big swarm.
And it was one of those where it was like, what is happening? And I was like, oh, evidently we're at cicada time.
Yep, this is it. This is the year.
Evidently. And it was awesome.
Yeah.
I fell in love with cicadas a little bit that year because of just how fascinating it was.
I heard a cicada the other day.
Oh, yeah.
I was walking around and there was one, because some cicada, there are the famous periodical cicadas.
Yes, and those when I was looking at, are North American.
Yes.
That is a North American thing for them to go down for more than a decade and come out at that 13, 17-year interval.
Yeah. But there are other cicadas that just are every year or every couple of years.
Well, and then there's others that will have a range from a year to I think they said up to 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
But different species aren't all syncing up, so you can have a different one coming out every year.
There's a brood.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just that brood might have been underground for 5 years for all you know.
Yes.
But there was a different one that came out last year, so...
Yep. So the thing that gets me about cicadas, and it's funny because it is the second most obvious thing about cicadas after the broods, because the brood cycle is such a famous...
And it's so weird just compared to other stuff.
Yeah, and it's that one genus, Magicicada, that their larvae just sit underground for 13, 17 years, and then they come out in just a world-dominating...
scream.
Yes. But the other thing that cicadas are famous for is that they are just so unbelievably loud.
Yeah. Which is not something you typically think of insects being.
Yeah.
Buzzing is one thing, but actually making purposeful noise.
And I've often found myself impressed with crickets. That you'll be outside, I'll be sitting around and hear a cricket chirping in the night, one lone cricket echoing off the walls, and find myself reflecting on just how loud a noise that is.
Yes, you are so tiny.
You're so small, and that's an astonishingly loud noise. Frogs are very much like that.
Yes.
You are a tiny, tiny little animal, and I can hear your croaking across the field.
Yeah, you're keeping me up.
Yes. Cicadas are famous for this, where it's like it's a drone.
Yep.
It makes me think of sirens.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you have an ambulance or a cop car drive by, especially if you're not in your car and you get that full experience of I heard this siren way before I saw this vehicle.
Way before I could figure out where you were coming from.
Yes, that is such a loud noise to be coming from one spot.
Yes.
It is a truly impressive thing that we have done to crank the decibels up so very loudly, and cicadas do that with nothing but their bodies.
And it's this is an insect making a noise so loud it can hurt.
Yeah.
This can be painful to human ears.
Yeah, and I've seen references that say that it can actually damage your ear.
Yeah, it would be like working around construction equipment that just long-term loud noises wears down the membrane and ear bones. It's just It's like using your knees too much. It just wears them down. Cicadas can do that.
Which is a just preposterous thing for a living thing to be able to do.
That's a superpower. Like, you now have a black canary thing going for you.
I buy it when it's like a tiger.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, yeah, you're gigantic. You're an enormous animal that can make an enormous noise.
Yeah, it was like when you finally hear like a elephant really just make some noise, and you're like, no, I mean, that's scary, but also you're an elephant.
Yeah, you weigh several cars worth for sure.
Yes, you are as big as the sound you're making.
Yes. A cicada is not.
No.
You are so small.
And I'm always impressed by insect noises because it's so different from vertebrate noises.
Mm-hmm.
Because when us bony animals make noise, typically, there are exceptions, but typically 9 times out of 10, we are moving air through a tube.
Yes.
Sometimes we're not doing it out of our mouth. We're moving it inside our body.
Yeah, in our resonating chamber.
But we're moving air like a horn and woodwind instrument. Yeah, we are moving air across something. But insects typically, there are some that will do that will squeeze air through like special shaped parts of their body.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's how hissing cockroaches is.
That's the example I was going to make, is that, they are actually hissing.
It is truly hissing.
Releasing air.
Mm-hmm. But most insects, your crickets and cicadas, are just vibrating.
Yes.
They're not using air to vibrate something else. They're just vibrating themselves, and the air is vibrating because of it.
Yeah. They're rubbing their legs together or their wings together.
They're like living drums.
Yes, they are living percussion instruments.
And that's crazy in and of itself. But then you're being so loud.
Yeah.
This is like this. It's so impressive.
Yes.
It would be like if we had a xylophone that we could make as loud as a siren.
Yes. It's every now and then you'll play with something. Rubber bands do this.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I remember the day I discovered that if you put a rubber band up to a hollow thing and you flick it, it will make a surprisingly loud noise because it's resonating in there. And then being like, ooh, this tiny thing, I can make a very loud noise. Cicadas are doing that. You mentioned the thing about it potentially damaging your ears. I read, supposedly, so cicadas hear.
Yes.
They have a quote-unquote ear.
Yeah.
They have a tympanum.
They are calling to each other.
Yes. So they can hear their noises. Apparently, and I did not dive deeply into this, cicadas can turn their ears off while they're making their calls so they don't hurt themselves.
Yeah.
You're making a noise too loud for yourself.
Yes.
So they deactivate their ears.
They stop listening.
Yeah, which is like, that's a joke. What's the thing where a robot turned their ears off? If there's a weird edit there, it's because Will and I just spent several minutes trying to remember some thing where a robot turns, or an android or someone turns their ears off.
So if you happen to know that scene,
we'll remember it. We paused recording to be like, no, we can get this. Yes. We'll make that reference. No, we don't know what it was. We both remember it.
We failed you.
We made it up. So yes, apparently they can supposedly protect themselves by doing that, which is a ridiculous thing to need to do.
Just another thing that makes insects just aliens.
Yes.
That's just what you can do. What? That's so crazy. And B, hilarious. Like,
yes.
I feel like there's a character I remember saying something like, it's like, what did you just say? I don't know. I stopped listening. That's what it's, I think is it 30 Rock or something where someone says, I've learned, no, it's The Office. I say a lot of things. I learned to just tune myself out. It just feels like that. I'm going to be yelling a while. I don't want to listen to that. But hopefully there's someone out there who does.
Cicadas are another one where I don't know off the top of my head the history. I know that cicadas go way, way back in the fossil record. I want to say I remember reading a thing not long ago about periodical cicadas having a relatively recent ancestry.
Yeah.
But the fact that these life strategies and behaviors exist makes you wonder, did this happen? Have there been bugs doing things like this for a very long time? Were there dinosaurs whose ears got damaged?
Yes.
Because they were in the forest and I also don't know how other animals react that, like, obviously some animals are like, oh, excellent.
Dinner bell.
It's buffet time. Like, gorge myself on cicadas because there's a million cicadas here. But I can only imagine that there are animals that are woken up by the din of cicadas and then have to leave.
Yep.
Like this, like a deer, just waking up and going, no, this is awful.
Well, and like,
let me find a meadow.
does that mean you won't hear predators coming? Does that mess up other animals' danger sense and observations?
I would have to imagine it does.
Like, surely.
Like, is there a correlation between, like, does hunting success increase?
Yes.
When a brood of cicadas has just emerged.
And when wolves hear cicadas, they go, oh boy.
We're going to eat well today.
You don't even got to be quiet.
Just run right up to a deer.
It's so... There's such interesting animals for, like, the just extremes. Because even when you're not dealing with the ones that are underground for more than a decade, a lot of them are underground for a year or more.
Yeah.
And, like... So they are, just on average, extremely long-lived insects. Like, there's tons of other insects that spend most of their life as larvae or, juveniles. And lots of them will spend 1 or 2 years that way. So that's not unheard of, but cicadas kind of, almost as a rule, tend to be very long-lived for an insect.
Yeah. Well, and they're also just hanging out in the dirt. Like, as far as I know, they're not really doing very much.
Yeah, they're just tapping into roots and drinking off the plant juices.
They're also a very charismatic looking insect.
They are so cool looking.
They look really cool. They look very sleek.
Yet both after molting and I think the larvae they look like little zergling, like they've got those little raptorial front claws for digging and climbing, and they just look so... I collected so many of the exoskeletons. Yeah. Because they were just hanging on the tree, and as soon as you touch them, they'd come loose, because nothing was actually muscle holding them on anymore. They had just clung there.
Yes. They're an extremely awesome insect. So this is gonna be casting some shade, I guess, on a lot of insects. They're a surprisingly awesome insect for bugs that eat plants.
Yep.
Like, usually plant-eating bugs aren't quite as super cool as cicadas are.
As edgy.
As edgy. Usually we're thinking, like, mantises and dragonflies. You've got these cool, sleek body shapes because you're hunting, and you got those forearms because you're grabbing at prey. No, cicadas are just very cool looking.
Well, you're cool when they decide to base a lot of the aesthetic of Cell from Dragon Ball Z off of you.
Who was very cool.
Like, that's one of my favorite DBZ villains, hands down. And they absolutely were like, what about a giant evil cicada?
Yes.
Sweet.
Giant evil cicada is really, that's a winning starting point.
That's a great sentence. I love it. Yeah. Another thing that I learned while looking up, which was one of those where I was pretty sure it wasn't an all cicadas case, but I had always heard the idea that adult cicadas were like some insects that didn't eat.
Right, like mayflies, right? You emerge as an adult, you reproduce, you don't even have mouth parts, and then you fall out of the sky, and that's the end.
I know there are some moths that function that way, where they are purely just to find a mate. And I had always heard that for cicadas, and I had assumed, like, my current understanding was that, I think there's some cicadas where that's the case. But then when I was looking up, there was a section that was like, folklore will often have you believe that they don't eat. They do. They've got mouth parts. They continue to drink plant juices.
Yeah.
And the reason I always believed it is because the front of a cicada's face, you can't see any mouth part. They've got that shield-looking faceplate, but the mouth part's behind that. And so I could never see it. And I was like, yeah, well, it sure does look like you're right. There's nothing there.
Yeah. No, we just hung out underground for 10 years.
Yeah.
And came up to have some food.
So yeah, they're also big. A lot of them are big.
Yeah, we were talking about how small they are because they're bugs.
Yeah.
But for bugs,
they're meaty.
They can get really big.
Like, I've been hit by a cicada flying before, and it's like, that actually hurt a little bit just because of the mass of you hitting me.
I have a memory from being at summer camp one day during a big, and I don't know if it was a brood, like one of the big broods, but there were a lot of cicadas around. And my memory is just of standing in one place and having another camper, one of my friends, look at me and go, "Don't move," which is not how you approach that scenario, because I had a cicada on my shoulder.
Yeah.
But I couldn't see it. It was in a position where I couldn't really see it, and he was like, "Don't move," and I was like, "Okay, what? I'm 10. What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And then I think he like leaned in to like brush it off, and I remember the feeling of something going like past, like hitting my ear on the way out, and I remember noting the sound of flapping.
Yes.
Not buzzing.
Yes.
Like it wasn't like when a fly takes off. It went and I was like, that's not a noise a bug is supposed to. That is very uncomfortable.
Yep. Yeah, no, I love how big their wings are and just utterly transparent. Like very, very picturesque.
Yeah, they're like a lace wing.
Yeah.
Kind of, because the wing extends in some of them beyond the body, and you get that transparent image of the back of them.
Yeah, so yeah, they are like when they're all folded up, they're like a little projectile, and then these just massive wings come out.
The other thing that's so cool about cicadas, because they have that reproductive cycle that they do, and because they're big, they are an ecological impact.
Yes.
You know, we talked about the hypothetically helping predators or moving animals out of the area. They also can absolutely devastate trees.
Yep.
And the plants they're eating. They are a bounty for predators that eat bugs. It's like an algal bloom of insects.
I know I've read before that cicada broods can be damaging to infrastructure because they can like gather around and like short out electronics just because their numbers can get so much. And like this is a thing that insects like ants do this all the time where they'll decide, ooh, this nice metal box is a great place for us to make, and then end up shorting out a circuit board or what's the word I'm looking for, a breaker board, a breaker box, and shorting it out because they end up connecting enough because there's so many of them that it shorts. Evidently cicadas can do that when they are looking for nooks and crannies and stuff, and they'll end up in transformers and stuff. So like they can affect human infrastructure just because there's so many of them.
It makes me wonder the hypothetical of if cicadas stopped.
Yep.
If there weren't cicadas, how many other organisms would be impacted by that? Because you have to imagine that is like that day or that month or whatever. Everything's just a little bit different.
Yep.
Because, we talk about noise pollution. Like, we humans produce a lot of noise pollution. That's noise pollution.
Yep.
That is originated noise pollution. And they take up so much space and they eat so much food that it's just it's like an annual flood of a river, or it's like the migration path.
Yeah,
it's like
when salmon run is what it made me think of.
It's something like that, but it's insects.
Well, and I saw one interesting idea when it came to talking about like things relying on them for the long-term brooding cicadas. That one of the ideas as to why they might do it is, for one, it syncs them all up. So it's the sea turtle mentality of if we have enough babies all at once, there's no way all the predators can eat all of them.
Right.
So just overwhelm them. And that's one thing that it absolutely does is if we all come out at the same time, there's just too many of us to eat. But that another idea is that if you wait a decade until the next run, the predators who might be more specialized will have mostly starved to death.
Right, that they can't rely on that. And they have to have other places to go to get food.
Yes, and that's super interesting to me that your response to predation is to maybe hide long enough that they can't evolutionarily arms race with you and specialize to take you down. Because you're not there often enough for them to specialize.
I've seen that argument made for why the number of years that the periodical cicadas wait is prime numbers.
Yeah.
That because they're prime numbers, it defies pattern.
Yes, exactly. It is a unusual pattern.
Yes. So you can't, right? If another species is on a 3-year pattern or a 2-year pattern or something, they're not going to line up with this because it's not going to factor into that. So it makes it naturally unpredictable.
Yeah, the only way for you to sync up with them is to be on the exact same pattern they're on.
Right. So you won't have, or perhaps you'll have less predators waiting.
Mm-hmm. There's not that predictability.
Yes, which is a very cool thing to note.
Well, and it also is just... and I don't know how much research there's been in this because so often it's difficult to really research this stuff, but like, how much are you doing underground in those 13, 17 years? Like, are you active during that, or do you really just find one spot and settle down?
Yeah.
Like, how much is going on? Are there specialist cicada predators underground that are just taking out just larvae,
digging them up?
Yep, and that the ones we get, the huge number we get at the end of that cycle is still just the survivors.
And that I don't know.
Yeah, like, and we are so bad at studying subterranean ecosystems.
It's very difficult to do,
and just our human brain doesn't grasp it very well. It is very much like we're not great at thinking in 3D movement when it comes to like underwater and in the ocean, where our brain just isn't reflexively good at that. So you have that in the ground because it's once again 3D. You can go up, down, side, back and forth. But then also there's stuff in the way that you...
Right.
It's not like... Water's fairly similar to moving through air. It's different, but it's similar.
Yeah.
Flying and swimming are very comparable. Digging is not.
No, that's a different thing.
That is a whole different thing. When you make a tunnel, someone could be right next to you and not know that tunnel's there. And... like how are you finding roots? Are you staying on? Do you tend to stay on the same tree you were hatched off of, or do they disperse? Like that, there's so much time because so for so many other insects, it's like they stay in the lake for a year. And it's like, all right, cool. Yeah. It's like no, that's like this. You're saying this thing stayed in this one patch for 13 years?
Just waited there.
What? That's so long.
Yeah. Very cool bugs.
I like them a lot.
They are very interesting. Hopefully we get to talk more about cicadas in the future. This was a very cool request. Thank you, Danielle, for giving us the opportunity to geek out about cicadas. I have seen the thing in movies and stuff where someone will have like a hearing aid and turn it off.
Yes.
That's not the reference I was thinking of, but that is also a thing that I've seen in a few places.
Which is also an incredibly endearing way to picture cicadas, is that for insects, they're very old. So when they come out, maybe they are a bunch of senior citizens.
Like, oh no, it's too much.
Oh, dearie, let me turn my hearing.
Turn that music down.
Yep.
Danielle, thank you so much for your support and for engaging with us at the podcast and on our Patreon. Thank you for this lovely request for a cicadas mini episode. Hopefully, there will be more bugs discussion in the future of the podcast. It's always a lot of fun to talk about, even though it defies our vertebrate bias on the podcast. We hope to continue to see you and hear from you in the future, and we hope that you continue to enjoy our discussions, bugs or otherwise, on the podcast. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye. Hello, David.
Hello, Will.
And hello, Robert, and welcome to your personal patron mini-episode. As one of our upper patrons, you get your own mini-episode on your personally chosen group of animals, and you picked ants.
Ants. We love talking about ants.
Ants are my favorite group of insects, personally. They're just so cool in the fact that they are super diverse and just indomitable. Like, there's just seems to be nothing that they can't figure out a way to survive and succeed in.
Yeah. We did a whole episode about ants, episode 149, with tons of overview information. So this seems like a really fun time to just talk about the extra stuff.
Yeah.
Stuff that didn't make it into that episode, or personal thoughts and musings that we had, or that you have. You're the ants guy.
Ants, yeah. I love just learning about all the side groups of ants that you don't hear about as often, because there's so many that like there's tons that are famous, like fire ants and army ants and leafcutter ants and stuff. But then there's a whole bunch that you don't hear about as often that have all their little neat quirks and tricks. There's a whole bunch of ant playlists on YouTube that I just will put on from time to time.
They're very interesting animals. They do a lot of really interesting stuff, but they're also everywhere.
Yes.
So it feels like almost no matter where you are in the world, you can be interested in your local ants.
And I think one of the cool things about the fact that they're everywhere is like basically every place has their, I don't want to say basic ant because there's not really just a basic ant, but that like you have ants doing fairly normal ant things, but then each place also has their weird ants that are doing their own unique, odd things. And that's very cool.
Yeah, it's very funny to refer to ants as doing basic, normal ant things because very little of what ants do feels basic or normal. They are extremely unusual insects.
Yes.
In just so much of what they do.
We're so used to ants that it's easy to forget that extremely eusocial, numerous, and problem-solving insect group is not the norm.
Yeah. Well, it's really funny to imagine. I think I've been in this situation. I assume lots of people have had this situation of finding ants in your house or in the building or whatever, and having that reaction of looking down in the corner or wherever and going, oh, there's ants. We've got ants here. Or maybe you see one ant and you're like, oh, I feel like even if you see one ant, you say, oh, we have ants.
Yes.
Because you know how ants. And it's very easy to not take the moment and reflect that that's not how it works for most bugs.
Yeah.
Most of the time you see like a stink bug or a spider and you go, oh, there's a spider. I've got a spider. But you see ants and we don't take the moment to reflect on the reason that's a problem is because ants are highly specialized for living their entire lives by the hundreds.
Yeah. So like if you see a single ant, immediately you are aware that somewhere near enough by for that ant to have walked from it is a nest
are hundreds of ants.
Hundreds to thousands, and with some species, millions.
A million ants.
Like, you immediately can connect that to the fact that there is a collective somewhere nearby. And yeah, that's not the case with most insects or most organisms.
Yeah.
Like, most animals that you see, you don't go, oh, there must be a flock of you somewhere. And it's like, no, that could just be a crow. You know,
one is here, one got over here.
That's fairly normal. It makes it feel much more like deer and herding animals, where it's like if I see a deer cross the road, I'm immediately like, are there more of you coming? Like, right. Is the rest of your family?
Always travel in ones.
Yes.
Well, it's also fun to think that that's also the reason ants are a problem.
Yeah.
It's like, again, if you find a spider in your home or a stink bug, there was a stink bug in my room yesterday, and so that's why it's on my mind. You see a bug, a bug got in.
Yes.
That it could have come in the open door, it could have come in any number of ways. Oh, well, I guess maybe I'll be careful about, leaving the door open. But if you see ants, you're like, something has to be done.
Yes.
If we don't do something about this, we will be overrun by ants. Well, that's how ants work.
And that's the other side of it, is not only is it like there's more of you coming, but I do not have that feeling of like, you accidentally got swept inside when I opened the door and closed it. You came here with a purpose. Yes. You are on a quest.
And you found a way.
Yes.
You found a way in, and you're going to remember that way and tell 100 other ants how to get in.
Yep, you left your chemical trail of breadcrumbs.
Yes.
And you are going to get back out.
And you're tiny, like, even for insects, tiny.
Yes.
Ants are often very, very small. So it is that sense of like, there's a hole in the wall somewhere that I can't even see that these ants have found and they're coming inside.
Yep, that always used to impress me when I would follow because that's what I do. I follow lines of ants when I see a line of ants because I want to know where you're coming from. And so very often it'd be like a crack in the sidewalk. And then I have to ask the question of like, how deep down are you actually in there? Yeah. Like, are you under this slab of sidewalk, or are you following a path that goes into this crack and then still further into this wall or something? Like, I don't know actually where you...
Is your nest below this slab or your nest across the street?
Yeah.
and you're making your way out through here.
Exactly. So you could be anywhere. You have so many ways to get where you want to be because you're so small, and they have that determination thing of they are just going to keep walking until they get to a thing that they want. And it's just it's often very easy to forget how tiny and how slow they are because of how small they are. Because often when you see them, it's a relay race of ants. So it feels much more substantial and quick because they're being very efficient. But it took that ant hours to get from its nest to where it is right now.
I think one of the things that's extra impressive about ants, obviously eusocial animals. We did an episode about ants. We did an episode about eusociality. Obviously, very cool topic. Ants stand out because they are one of the very rare examples of animals that use great numbers for predatory purposes.
Yeah.
That, there are lots of animals that, they're herds of thousands of bison or wildebeest. Termites are eusocial. Bees are eusocial. But those are all generally plant-eating animals. They are going after plants. There are predatory animals that live in groups, right? Wolves will hunt in packs. Wild dogs will hunt in packs. But those are a dozen at most in most of those cases.
And a lot of times they'll still be hunting as individuals.
Yeah, like wolves in the off-season are still, it's still one wolf going after rabbits and whatever.
Yep.
There are not very many groups of animals that get together in large numbers to hunt. And
even other predatory eusocial insects like wasps are still usually individually foraging and looking for food.
Right.
They don't, wasps, like yellow jackets they're carnivorous. They're also omnivorous. I think they'll eat other stuff, but they are very heavily meat eaters. But they aren't swarming a mouse to take down or swarming a big insect.
Your group behavior is for other stuff.
Yeah. You find food and then each of you bring it back. Right. And you build the nest together.
Well, and there are animals like carnivorous fish or sharks that will sometimes gather in the same place because that's where the food is. But you're not working together.
Yeah, you aren't killing the prey as a team.
Right. Ants are one of and obviously there are, ants aren't all exclusively carnivorous. There are ants that eat plants, and there are, fungus farming ants, all that kind of cool stuff. But there is something uniquely imposing about ants. This is one of the only groups of animals where you have that where if I stick my finger in this hole in the ground, I could be covered in hundreds of these little tiny predators who are in a concerted effort to do harm to me.
Yes, and it's a very different situation than a lot of other pack hunting predators. Because wolves will work together to take down bigger prey than they could take down individually, but then they are still very effective predators individually. There are many ants where it's individually, you are actually not a super effective predator.
No.
You can't hunt much if you're just by yourself. It's as a group, as a superorganism that you become an effective predator.
And in many cases, ants are obligate group hunters.
Yes, exactly.
If you don't have your colony to collect food with, you don't eat. You need to do it that way.
Which is another example of how weird ants are and how easy it is to forget that. Because then when you come across the things like bullet ants and bulldog ants and stuff like that are individualistic predators. They hunt individually and then they will bring it back to the nest and still live in their eusocial and communal group, but they're hunting as individuals. You go, whoa, that's a tough ant. It's that's actually fairly normal for an animal.
Most insects.
That's what most predators do. It's so common to think of ants as the army and fire ants swarming to get your food that an ant not doing that, it seems weird.
And I think that's something really fascinating about ants because they are so widespread. They're all over the planet. Because they're so distinctive in what they do, ants and the lifestyles of ants are among the most famous among insects.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see, sci-fi movies will make alien creatures based on insects, and they very often base it on things like ants.
Yep.
We think about inside. If you ask a group of people, name some insects that you might see, they'll think about ants. Ants are very famous. They're very familiar, which makes it easy to forget that what they're doing is weird.
Yes.
And that's part of why you're famous,
Mm-hmm.
is because you are an extremely unusual group of insects doing something that is extremely unusual.
Like, how many other groups of animals can you think of where you have extremely different morphotypes, types of your species, some of which can be 10 times the size of each other, and you're all the same species?
You're all the same family,
Yeah.
essentially.
You're all coming from the same queen. You all share the same genetics from that queen. It's just that the way you developed made you into a soldier or a worker or a drone, or a keeper of the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can be anywhere from itty bitty to giant with completely different facial structure. How many other animals can do that?
Termites.
Yeah, there's not many things where you can see this level of difference and it not be different species.
Yes.
But for ants, that's fairly normal. There's tons of groups of ants that have caste systems of just different types of workers.
Yep.
And that's so normal that we're just like, yeah, that's what bugs and stuff do. It's not. It's what ants do, and it's weird.
They're a great example of the kind of thing we've talked about of here's a group of animals that became highly specialized to do a very unusual, weird thing, but became so successful at it that then they conquered the world doing that thing.
I think one of the best examples for me of how successful ants are is that there's tons of ants that only feed on other ants, that raid their nests for their larvae, and that's all they do.
Yeah.
They don't eat other things. They are purely predators of other ants. So it's like there's so many ants and they're so successful that there are food chains that almost only include ants in them.
Yes. Well, it's fascinating to think that there is a group of animals called anteaters.
Yes.
Now, obviously, they are not exclusively eating ants.
Mm-hmm.
I assume anteaters, eat whatever they want.
Yeah.
You can slurp it up on your tongue. But, there are animals whose thing is to go and find ant colonies because they are loaded with food for them. And ants, termites, and bees seem to be the main three groups of animals where you can do that.
Yep.
Where you can, if I can find the home, there's a whole meal in there. And it's also fascinating to think that ants establish their colonies as so vast and so efficient that they can lose hundreds of ants to a predator like that and then just continue existing as a colony.
Yeah.
Because that was only actually a fraction of the ants that live here.
Yep. Well, and it also has the same feeling to me as what we talked about with herbivores, that of course you're going to have plant eaters because plants rule the world. So why wouldn't you eat these things that are everywhere?
Yeah.
Ants also fall into that category. Why wouldn't you eat these things that are everywhere?
Which makes it really, because we talked about in the ants episode, they're on both sides. There are tons of animals that have developed specific adaptations and behaviors to protect themselves from ants.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you live in a certain niche or ecosystem and you don't protect yourself against ants, you won't survive.
Yeah.
Because there's ants everywhere.
Yes, because it is just smart to not mess with ants.
And then on the other side, you have a bunch of examples of animals that have evolved specific adaptations to eat ants, because it would be silly not to.
Yes.
They're everywhere. I like to make the phrase that insects are nature's trail mix.
Mm-hmm.
That's insects form the base of a lot of food chains because they're just everywhere. They're crunchy. They're super easy to eat. They're full of protein. Every time I say that, I'm thinking ants.
Yep.
That's the trail mix in my head is ants.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and another thing of how successful they are, and this is the case for lots of insect groups, there was a whole true facts about the parasites, but also just hangers-on of army ants. That there's a whole bunch of mites and other insects that make their entire lives around either fitting into the colony, to avoid being eaten or to take advantage of the raids flushing out prey as well, or
to live somewhere within the colony
and get that protection.
Getting protection and also stealing food.
Yep. But there's also like mites and insects that hang on to the ants that are so specialized that they mimic parts of the ant's body parts.
Yeah.
There's one that mimics their abdomen. There's a mite that hangs onto the end of the foot and then puts out two of its limbs to act as a replacement end of the foot so that it just replaces the tip of the foot. The ant's foot is still there. Its little claws are still there, but the mite
like
is now
shoe.
taking it up. Yes.
It's just a little slipper.
It's just a little extension, but it still does basically as good a job, so it doesn't affect the ant's survival or the effectiveness of the colony, but now the mite gets the benefit of feeding off the ant and protection in the colony. And it's like bees have their own parasites, so it's not like this is unique. A lot of
this is also true of bees and termites.
Yes, this is not unique to ants.
Mole rats.
Yes.
Once again, as always, little nod to naked mole rats. Super weird.
Yep.
Moving on.
Yep. But like, that just speaks to how successful and for how long these groups have been successful that you have incredibly selective and specialized parasites and cohabitants that, because there's been ants for so long, have been able to get this good at living alongside ants.
Yes, there are whole ecosystems built around ants.
Precisely.
They are ecosystem engineers in their way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating to think, as we learned in that episode, that ants have been doing ant stuff since the Cretaceous.
Yeah.
That, like, dinosaurs in the late Cretaceous could have stumbled upon ant colonies that would have acted. Like a hadrosaur in its nest could have seen an ant and gone, oh no, we have ants.
Yep. Well, one of the things I always think of, and this is definitely a slightly dramatic example, but not a wrong example, in Walking with Prehistoric Beasts, they had the episode with the terror birds talking about, like, these are the last dominant members of the dinosaur group that are still notably high up on the food chain and big
predators,
apex predators. Exactly. Like, this is kind of the last remnants of when that was normal. Now this is kind of all we have left of that. And one of the examples they gave for why they may not have stuck around is that they would have to be ground dwelling, and that makes their eggs more vulnerable, which is also true of ground dwelling birds today. So that's not the only reason they would have gone extinct. But the example they decided to use for, like, one of the dangers was they had the baby get attacked by ants.
Yes.
And get killed by ants. And so, like, that is not the reason we don't have terror birds. So it was a slightly overly dramatic example and gave the feeling that it's like, yes, ants wipe them out. But that's not actually.
Right.
But that is a legitimate, like, yeah, if you nest on the ground or you have your burrow on the ground and an ant colony, like a raid of army ants finds your babies, what are they going to do?
Yeah.
And that happens all the time, where you will find picked clean young skeletons after ants have been there. So it's like they absolutely would be shifting and shaping the evolution of things that share their habitat. Even big animals, if your babies are on the ground, doesn't matter how big they are.
Yeah. Well, and how many individual animals' behavior is modified by one time where they came across an ant colony.
Yes, yep.
I mean, there are tons of humans who have that. It's like, yeah, you learned a lesson one time because you sat on an ant nest, and now, how many organisms are around the world who act in a certain way because one time they got too close to an ant colony?
Yeah, it is a common thing that if you lived here in the southeast of the U.S. and you see a bit of bare ground that's slightly raised up in the grass, you just don't go near it.
Don't go near that.
Yeah. Maybe it's just a raised bit of dirt that got messed up during the landscaping. Absolutely could be.
Could be.
But if it's not, you're going to have a bad day. That's a story from when I was younger. Was we went to go see 4th of July fireworks, and my dad found this one spot. He's like, perfect view of the fireworks, and no one was sitting there. And Dad was like, I wonder why no one's sitting here, and plopped me down in the best spot. And then partway through the fireworks, I started screaming, and it was a fire ant nest. And the I don't remember any of this because I was too young, but they said they rushed me home and put me in the bath and filled up the tub, and there were just ants floating. Oh, no. I was just covered. Luckily, I don't remember it, so I did not develop some phobia.
Right.
But
that one time you were covered in fire ants.
I've definitely had those moments of realizing I'm standing in an ant nest with sandals or something.
Yep.
Being like, oh no.
Oh, I don't like seeing an ant makes me very paranoid.
Mm-hmm.
And especially every now and then, this happened a few times in my life, where I'll like look down at my hand and there's an ant on it. And I'm like, I don't know how that ant got on my hand.
Nor how long it has been.
Nor how long it has been there. Nor where it came from. And now I need to go take a shower.
Yep.
So I don't know how many ants are there.
Yep. I used to love interacting with ants because I was in the gross dorm for my freshman year of college, and so we had ants. They just old Animal House-esque dorm. And the place I worked during college had a go-kart track out back, and there's just this area that led to the back of the building, and there would be ants out there all the time. And so I used to feed those ants at work. I would, someone would leave a slushie and not finish it. I'd be like, sweet, and just drop some on the concrete and wait for an ant to find it. And then while I'm out there for just the entire day watching people go around in a circle on a go-kart track, sure, I look over and watch as the amount of ants slowly increased. And then in my dorm room, I used to like to, if anyone's ever heard the trick of trapping them with chalk, mm-hmm, the reason that works is that you're breaking their scent trail.
Right, and they're trying to find it.
And you've added a new chemical for them to sense, and they avoid it because they don't know what that chemical is. So they hit the chalk wall and go, and then they're trying to find their scent trail that you've now broken with this ring. The trick I used to like to use is I would wipe my finger on my deodorant.
Yeah.
And then I draw an invisible circle around them, and they'd get trapped, and my roommates would be like, how did you...
What sorcery?
And I was like, it is. Don't anger me. I'll send my ants after you.
Some of the ants. They are an extremely cool group of animals.
And I love learning about the way they problem solve with their eusociality, and that it's not mind control, it's not psychic link. It's much more like a computer of just... If enough ants agree, they can make decisions and solve problems in just a if-then series of interactions. Mm-hmm. If this, I do that. If that, I do this. And that series of simple behaviors combine into very complex behaviors. It's beautifully simple and shockingly complex at the same time.
Yes. Well, this is the quintessential animal that people are talking about when they use the term superorganism.
Yep.
So yeah, this is that animal. The idea that hundreds to thousands of individuals are acting in ways that build off of each other and react to each other to the effect that you get essentially one larger organism made of smaller organisms.
They also feel like the best example for the phrase greater than the sum of their parts.
I was thinking that earlier when we were talking about an ant cannot do very much.
Not much.
But many ants are unstoppable.
And they can then do things that the single ant could not do, period. Yes. Like creating rafts and surviving floods. If a single ant was dropped in the water, it would probably drown much quicker. Mm-hmm. On the raft, they can take turns on who's on the bottom of the raft so that they don't drown. And that's insane. They are so cool, and they are by far the reason I have the tastes in sci-fi that I do. I've always been a sucker for swarms of the xenomorphs from the Alien movies and Tyranids from Warhammer and the arachnids from Starship Troopers. I am a sucker for swarms, and it's 100% because of ants and because I grew up in Georgia with fire ants. And as awful as they are for being invaders and messing up your yard, they are so cool.
Thank you, Robert, for requesting this for your mini episode, giving us a chance to geek out a bit more about ants. Always a fun topic to discuss.
Yes.
And thank you, of course, for your incredible support for us on our Patreon. We really appreciate it. We hope that you continue to enjoy the episodes that we release, the main podcast stuff, and also all the benefits and goodies that you get on Patreon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, Will.
Hello, David.
Hello, Joshua, and welcome to your very own mini episode. As you know, you are one of our top tier patrons. Thank you so much, by the way. And you got to request a mini episode on a subject of your choosing, and the group of animals you chose is Polychaetes, also known as bristleworms. Polychaetes are a group of mostly marine worms, which is very fun. I like Polychaetes. To my mind, are the quintessential marine worms.
Yes, same.
And I don't know if that's true. I don't know how many different groups of worms there are that are actually very successful in the oceans.
I know that there are other like acorn worms and stuff and like that are very successful in the marine setting.
I think polychaetes stand out because they are very successful. They're very diverse. They include some of the coolest worms.
Yep.
But they also look like worms a lot of the time, which is not the case. Like acorn worms don't always look, or what was the other one the arrow worms, I think?
Oh, yeah.
That we talked about in the news not too long ago. Those don't really look like worms a lot of the time. But polychaete worms, they're annelids.
Yes.
So polychaetes are part of the group that includes earthworms and leeches. They are annelid worms, and they often are just long worms.
Well, I think the thing it stands out and why I feel the same way about them being the first thing I think of when I think of marine worm is because they are all over the place, but they also have fit into just vastly different aspects of ocean life and have just occupied about as many roles other than being like big free swimming predators and stuff.
Right.
Like, but otherwise, like, they are fit into a bunch of the key roles of ocean life in a way that I can't think of a lot of other groups, single groups doing. So they're just very successful and very differentiated in the way some of them are surviving. And that's cool.
Yeah, because there are a number of them that are swimmers. There are a bunch that are very famously burrowers.
Yep.
And then there are some that are super weird, that like tube worms. Worms that do very unusual things. I was refreshing my memory of which worms are polychaete worms, and it was reminding me just how many super cool species there are within polychaetes.
Yep.
Sand striker worms are polychaete worms.
Yep.
Which is the first one that comes to my mind.
Yes.
Oh, that's super cool. Those are the worms that burrow down in the sand, and then when a fish swims by, they launch out and snap at it with their preposterous jaws.
Yep, they're inverted pharynx.
And slice a fish in half.
Yeah, because they have a scissor mouth.
Yeah, they do.
And they're not even the only ones with jaws. There's a bunch of others that have that can also invert their pharynx, which turn their mouth inside out, basically, and then have teeth inside there so that they can bite either for feeding or defense. And so there's a whole bunch, like bloodworms, I think, are one of those that people will get. And I believe they're polychaetes. But yeah, like there's a bunch of others with mouth parts.
Yeah. There's also stuff like I think they're called feather duster worms, which are, because they're called bristle worms, polychaetes, because they often have bristles along these sort of spines or ribbons sort of sticking off the body. They often have very complex and ornate head ornamentation, mouth parts and stuff like that. So a lot of them don't look like worms.
Yep.
Once they're covered in all this stuff. And the feather duster worms, I think it's structures that come off the head.
Yes.
That form this weird flowery shape.
Yeah, there's also ones called fan worms, which have a similar, and they use them to filter feed and stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, many of them like burrow into coral, a lot of the tube worms, and then have their little tubes where they poke their face out and spread those fans out, those feather dusters. So like at a glance, it looks much more like it's some weird anemone. And you wouldn't know there's a whole worm down there. And it's not actually attached to the reef. It has burrowed into the reef. And that's, they can live like a part of the reef, basically.
Yeah, which is also the case for a lot of the vent and seep worms. Polychaetes are famous for, there are a number of species that live at hydrothermal vents and cold seeps.
Yep.
Your tube worms, which means not only, very cool environments, but some of the most extreme habitats on the planet inhabited by members of these worms. And sometimes they get huge.
Yep.
They can be really big.
Very successful.
They are very successful. They form an important part of those unusual ecosystems. And they're surviving in particularly unusual, extreme heat near hydrothermal vents, surviving off of the chemicals in those hydrothermal vent systems. Very cool worms.
You also have a bunch that are really, like you mentioned, there are swimming ones, and there's also a bunch that just crawl around and are very active. We had a little educational pool in one of the classrooms at the aquarium, just a small little habitat so that the kids could see, not reach in and touch, but there was a little polychaete in there, only a few inches long, but it was just one of the like bristles down the body style, and you would often see it just wiggling its way around the rock, and they'll use those bristles like the little small hair-like hooks on the underside of an earthworm. They'll use those as traction to push themselves along, so they just wriggle the body and the hairs ratchet them through their habitat. But also a lot of times those hairs are venomous, so they made the point of like, yep, there it is. If you touch anything in here, make sure not to touch that one, because you will be in a lot of pain. Like their hairs will have venom to them that's just often very painful.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and when it's cool getting to see a worm, because so often we think of worms as underground, and many of them are burrowers.
Absolutely. A lot of these are, they burrow into the sea floor or into reefs.
But there's a bunch that just crawl around and are more like a centipede or a millipede in the way they're moving around the sea floor than what we typically think of worms doing, which I like. There's something that's very impressive to me of you are mobile in your environment, which is not a thing common to a lot of other members of the annelid group.
Yeah. I was also reminded that Osidax worms are polychaetes. These are the bone worms.
Yeah, they are, aren't they?
I don't know the scientific names of many worms. Osidax, I know. These are the worms. We've talked about these before. These are the worms that burrow not into reef or into the sediment, but into bone.
Yes.
You find, I think they, if I remember right, they were discovered like 20 years ago at a whale fall. And these are worms that will, in a later stage of the whale fall life cycle, quote unquote life cycle, the decomposition and scavenging stages of the body, at a certain point the bones start to become fuzzy.
Yes.
Because it's just all these worms that burrow into the bone and feed off of the nutrients there.
Yeah.
Super cool.
And it's such a fascinating survival strategy of worms, because also that is a temporary habitat. Yeah. Like, that's only there as long as that whale body's there. That is not like a reef that will be sitting around for thousands or millions of years.
Right. Or even a hydrothermal vent.
Yes.
Like, yeah, this is temporary in the long run. But no, this is going to be here for a while.
Yeah, this is going to be here for centuries, and you will have plenty of time.
A whale fall's like years. Yeah. Maybe.
And so that's a whole different that's such an extreme form of survival to me. Of like, not only are you eating a very unusual, like, not many things eat bone. You know, there's predators that swallow bone, but many of them then just pass the bone through, like
a hyena poop is full of bone shards.
Yeah,
they're not digesting a lot of that bone.
Even crocs that can break down the bone, their poop is still a lot of that bone material. It's just powdery because it's all of that calcium that's been broken down from they're not actually digesting the bone.
Yeah, the worms show up, the whale fall's been there for a year or whatever, and all the fish and crabs and stuff have gotten all the meat off of it, and they've all left. And then these worms come along and they go, there's still good stuff here.
Yeah.
There's still a feast to be had.
This is the best part. You guys left the best.
Gotta get in there and really get into those nutrients.
Like when someone doesn't eat the crust of the pizza, there's always that one person that's like, well, that's the best part.
Come on, give all your crust to me. These are the crust worms.
Yes. And like, so not only are you eating a very extreme form of food that is not common, but it's not like you're going after bone that's still living. You know,
right.
You have to find a dead body in the bottom of the ocean. Whoa, and that's the largest environment on the planet, the seafloor. Like, so you have...
Some of us eventually will land on one of these bones.
Yeah, that's so insane. Oh, the fact that can maintain species kind of boggle, like the statistic of that seems like it shouldn't work, but it does.
I remember there was a paper several years ago that described an ichthyosaur fall. It was a Jurassic paper that was, here's this ichthyosaur body, And it's preserved well enough that we can see the stages of decomposition on it that kind of map to whale fall. This seems to have sat on the floor for a while. And so we can track these different stages. And if I remember correctly, the ichthyosaur followed a slightly different path than a whale fall would, where the whale fall eventually falls apart, but this ichthyosaur appeared to have become a reef.
Yeah.
Like the bones stuck around and then stuff started, building upon the bones. And the study, one of their conclusions was that ichthyosaur fall lingered for longer than whale falls do today. And one of the major hypotheses for why that is because Osedax worms hadn't evolved yet.
Yeah.
So based on our understanding of that group of worms, they weren't around yet, which the existence of these worms has changed how falls work.
Yeah. Which also makes you wonder, man, what did the ocean floor look like? Were bodies more common to find?
Were there reefs built upon the bodies of ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs and stuff more often?
Would you have, effectively ichthyosaur graveyards where it's like, this is the place where you come to mate and, reproduce or whatever. So you frequent this area, so you're dying in this area regularly. So there's just skeletons. Like if you were to go scuba diving in that area during the Mesozoic, you would just be seeing dozens of skeletons spread out across the seafloor with stuff growing on them.
Yeah.
But then these worms came around. And man, what a heyday it must have been when they first evolved.
Right? It's fantastic. Look at all this leftovers everyone's been leaving.
Which also makes me wonder, did their reproduction and lifestyle have to change as they changed the face of the seafloor? Mm-hmm. Like when skeletons were common, were they just able to kind of function like a normal polychaete? But then as that didn't become the case, have they had to change their lifestyle to be able to hopscotch between these whale falls and large animal falls?
Yeah. Or was it never, that much of a smorgasbord?
Yeah.
Was it always that it was rare? And so being able to survive on these sparse, widely spaced out resources was always a feature.
Yeah.
Did you start out doing something else? Did you start out dispersing to reefs or whatever? And then eventually it turned out, a dead whale will also suffice.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually specialized to forget the reef part and only go through the life cycle on a whale body.
Which once again makes me think of comparing them to the feather duster worms of those are worms. The feather duster worms are ones that feel like part of the reef, like an anemone or a piece of coral that's filter feeding, but is actually a worm. This has that same kind of feeling to where it's that means you're kind of like how algae for our day-to-day life. So if you leave some water out, eventually it's going to start growing some algae just because.
Yeah, if you leave out a piece of bread and get fungus on it.
Yes, exactly. Mold and algae is so present in every environment that any damp spot or bit of nutrition where they can grow, they will eventually make it there unless we hermetically seal the area.
Right. This is like if you leave a piece of coral in the ocean, if you leave a bone on the seafloor, will it just inevitably sprout worms?
Yes, exactly. Are they like bone mold effectively, except worms? Which is that's such an alien way for an animal to be living.
Yeah.
That it's awesome.
And speaking of the fossil record, I remember one of the cool things that I learned early on about polychaetes is that they are worms, and therefore they do not tend to have a great fossil record.
Yep.
Except that a bunch of them have hard parts.
Yes, they do.
And they tend to be the mouth parts.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading a story a while back about sand striker worm fossils.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, we don't find fossils of sand striker worms generally, but we do find those crazy jaws that they have. Just the piece, just half a jaw will be fossilized, and that is our fossil record of these worms, is the business end of the worm.
Which is so cool. Like that just adds to your reputation so beautifully.
Yep.
But then also brings up the question of man, how weird were your bodies? Were any of you doing it in a different way than are today? Because today's sand striker worm is a long worm that
they are among the biggest worms for sure, like as worms go, but certainly polychaetes. Sand striker worms can get up to like, I don't want to say the rub, but like at least a meter long.
Yes, for sure.
I think more than that. You say
so.
some stuff, and I'm going to ask the
Yeah. No, they definitely can get to, like, meter is the measurement I know I've seen being, like, the go-to length for them. And, you know, they're not, like, as big around as your arm. They're not girthy. They're still thin worms, but they're very long, and they burrow, and then they will, like, reach out of the burrow quite a distance when you watch videos of them hunting.
Yeah.
Like, when it's not just a... like antlion situation where you need to fall on my face for me to bite you. It's, I will reach out a good 5-6 inches.
I'll come for you.
I'll come for you. Were there worms doing different stuff? Were there ones that were doing a similar sit and wait strategy but with a different technique?
Yeah.
And
I did double check, and I thought it was 3 meters, but then I had a moment of questioning myself and realizing that if that's wrong, that's ridiculous.
Yep.
But no, 3 meters.
That's
10 feet long.
I had the same moment when I was like, is it 3 meters or am I thinking that meters are 3 feet?
That's same thing.
I know there's a 3 here.
They are known to grow up to 3 meters long.
Yeah.
With, according to the internet, an average diameter of 1 inch.
Which is like that. It's almost weirder to me that they don't get girthy.
Yeah. Why are you so long?
Yeah.
There's nothing. There's not even much body there.
You're just so long for how thin you are. What is that how is that benefiting you? And I know for some worms that can like help with reproduction because they just can increase the like reproductive section.
Right, because the reproduction in polychaetes apparently is very strange.
Oh yeah.
That they will grow extra segments. Some of them will grow a sexually reproductive form.
Yep.
That then reproduces.
Yeah, breaks off and goes and does the reproducing for them. Yeah. Like, I don't want to go mingle. You go mingle.
I'll do it. I'm busy worming.
Yeah. But yeah, then there's ones that'll grow extra sections that'll just break off into new worms.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole bunch that do spawning where they just pump their reproductive material into the water and it just mixes and becomes
like fish.
Yep, part of the plankton that's going to be floating around the water until eventually they settle down where they settle down.
Yep. Well, that's also how tapeworms do, isn't it? That they'll grow sections and then the sections come apart and each section is effectively an egg.
Yes.
I don't think tapeworms are polychaetes.
I don't think so.
I'm going to find out.
And I don't know how sand striker worms reproduce. I've never heard specifics on that.
Same.
But that would, if I was a betting person, I'd wonder if that extra length has something to do with that because
yeah, it could.
That's a very wormy thing to do of like, well, if I grow more, I can make more babies because of how alienish I reproduce.
I also wonder if you are longer, does that make you more effective?
Yeah.
Can you reach out of the burrow farther? Does it give you more anchoring stuff down?
Which is also such a crazy thing to think of a worm being a ambush predator for not like other worms, but like fish.
Yeah. As always, invertebrates eating vertebrates feels just like an inversion of the natural order.
It's sick and wrong. Because if you told me that a worm bit me, it'd be like, all right, yeah, but when I pull away, won't I just pull it in half?
Right, it's a worm.
But this one's like wrangling fish back down into its hole with its mouth. So there's a tough worm. That's unnervingly tough.
Big, sturdy jaws.
Yeah.
And also it's not like the fish is going to fight anymore.
Yes.
Once that bite happens, that does a whole lot of damage.
It does. Like they absolutely can bite something in half. And then, they have those bristles all the way down the body that I'm sure just give them ultimate traction.
Yeah.
And just make it to where you have a really good grip on the inside of your burrow.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw documentary footage of sand striker worms. Probably in like Planet Earth or one of those BBC documentaries where it's this fish swims by and this worm comes out, pulls it down into the burrow, and there's a moment where the fish is like peeking out of the burrow and then it gets pulled down the rest of the way.
Like a horror movie.
And I was like, that's just horror movie footage.
Yep.
That's no monsterification was needed. Obviously, like, you've put dramatic music behind it and you've framed it.
And then and although we can picture the fish calling out to its friends before it's dragged the last little bit, it wasn't.
Right. There's some done upness here. But the footage is that this worm pulled the fish almost all the way down and then paused a moment and pulled it down the rest of the way and it disappeared forever.
Yeah.
That's a horror movie.
The pacing is one for one for a scene from a monster movie.
That worm has got the pacing. That worm is going places. Tapeworms are flatworms.
Yes, that's what I thought.
But that's also what I thought. I wanted to double check.
Yeah, it's really impressive. There's as I often mention, there's a whole True Facts. True Facts is one of my favorite YouTube channels because it's hilarious. But then, especially with the more and more recent ones, like the earlier ones were much sillier, but over time they've gotten much more informative to the point where like they'll mention every now and then in the descriptions and stuff, like they work with experts, like they contact researchers to get images from the paper and film and stuff. So there's actually a ton of work gone into making it educational while also ridiculous and silly. And they have a whole one on Polychaetes, and it's fantastic. It starts with the feather dusters and then moves to the others. And it's fantastic. Just as you go through, I constantly have the feeling when I am looking at Polychaetes of like, are we sure we're on the same animals still? Because that one had feathers for a face that it filter feeds with, and this one is a graboid.
Yes.
This is from Tremors, and it's grabbing fish out of the water. Are we positive we're in the same group? Because this is so different.
And incidentally, I believe that there is some question about the taxonomic linkage of Polychaetes, that the group Polychaetes may actually be multiple groups.
Yeah, which is not surprising when you have such a diverse group, especially of invertebrates.
Right. That being said, there's plenty of groups that have a preposterous amount of diversity within them. So that's not the only reason that we might question if it is a single group or we've lumped multiple groups together. But it would, and I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know very much about the phylogeny of them. I wouldn't be surprised if we sat down with the worms and went, these over here are so disparate, they feel like they shouldn't be in the same group. And then we look at the phylogeny and people say, we're not sure that Polychaetes are all the same group, but those are, in fact, all in the same lineage.
Yep.
Yeah, that you're wrong about that. Those are actually all related to each other.
Yeah, the biggest reason I would be not surprised for them to be split up is just because of how many there are.
There's tons.
There's so many. They're everywhere. There's so many species.
Yeah, there are freshwater Polychaetes. Apparently, I read in passing there are terrestrial Polychaetes.
Oh, there are.
I have no more information about that.
Yep. I think a lot of those end up being the ones that wriggle around with their bristles, but I don't know specifics about them. Yeah.
Truly a fascinating group of animals.
Very cool.
Worms get a bit of a bad rap.
Yeah.
They get a bad rap as like pesty things, but also just as boring animals.
And as gross.
Yeah.
And there's definitely some of these in this group that gave me the heebie-jeebies.
In this discussion, I have said the words tapeworm and leech.
Yeah.
And some of them are creepy crawlies.
Yep. But one of the things that does set Polychaetes apart from a lot of other worms, so many of them are really pretty.
They're very pretty.
Like, the bristles will often be like bright red and stuff, and the feather duster worms are just like ornamentation. Like they look like they're a decorative feather. And so some of them are really, really pretty. And that's just not what you expect when you hear someone say worm. Even the sand striker worm is fairly colorful.
Yeah, and they've got all sorts of stuff sticking off the face. They look very ornamented.
Yeah. So they defy a lot of the general perception of worms and assumptions about worms.
Which is to say they are not a lot like earthworms.
No.
Which is the worm we're thinking of when we think worms.
And
so this is when people say, would you still love me if I was a worm? They're thinking earthworm.
Yes.
And it's like, well, listen, if you're a polychaete.
Yeah, no.
Fantastic.
We're good. If you're, which that's the correct response. That's the correct response to that question from now on. There you go, internet.
Which worm are you? Are you a tapeworm? Because I've got terrible news. I don't know about that.
I like quality time, but not that much.
Are you a bone worm? Because awesome.
Oh yeah,
fantastic.
I know what I want to be done with my body.
Yes, feed me. me to the bone worms. Joshua, thank you for making this request for your mini episode. We have had a whole lot of fun talking about worms. Hopefully we'll get the chance to talk more about worms in the future of the podcast. Thank you also for your support on Patreon. We really greatly appreciate it.
Very much so.
We hope you continue to enjoy the podcast and continue to support us for as long as you are willing and able. Stay tuned for more stuff. And that's it.
Bye.
Bye.
Hello, David.
Hello, Will.
And hello, KitKat. Welcome to your personal patron mini-episode. As one of our top supporters, you got to choose which group of animals you wanted us to talk about on this episode. And the animal you chose was the pangolin.
Very cool choice.
Really, really cool one.
Just an awesome group of animals. Pangolins, extremely cool.
So we are happy to talk about it. I've always found the pangolin fascinating just because not only does it have the anteater thing going of you are surviving in an unusual way, like on an unusual set of food with a very specialized diet adaptations, but then you also did extra stuff.
Well, the pangolins feel like they are trying their best to do all the Xenarthran stuff.
Yeah.
They've got the armor like armadillos, and they've got the tongue and the feeding style like anteaters. They really want to be in that club.
Yes.
And they're not. Xenarthrans are so weird.
Mm-hmm.
Pangolins are this group that is convergent with some of the weirdest stuff about Xenarthrans.
Yeah, equally weird on their own.
Yes.
And that's surprising. Like, if you showed people them, an anteater, an armadillo, and a pangolin all together, it would be almost hard to convince them they're not in the same group.
Yeah. Well, and pangolins are one particular group of animals. There's like a few genera of pangolins across Africa and Southeast Asia, but they're one of those weird groups that is so distinct from everything else, that is very different and feels very much like they stand on their own, to the point that, to my knowledge, exactly who they are related to over the years has been mysterious.
Yeah, they've kind of got the turtle thing going of...
Yeah, or like bats.
Yeah.
It was like just very weird.
Don't quite fit into any expected family tree.
As far as I'm aware, the current best supported idea is that pangolins are closely related to carnivorans.
Yes.
That they are close to the group of carnivorous mammals.
Which is another, like, if you are indeed closely related to them, boy, are you a weird version of that.
You went off and did a weird thing.
That is so different. They are just very neat animals. I also like them because they are just aesthetic as all get out.
They are very cool looking.
Yeah,
they're very sleek.
Mm-hmm.
They look very well, like if this was an art piece.
Yes,
like this is a well-made piece of art.
Mm-hmm. Like and they got that cute little face up front. So just like a cartoon character ready to go.
Yeah,
it's you've got this interesting pattern with all of your shingles, and then a cute little face, and then you've got those little like nervous hands because your claws curl in.
Yes. Well, yeah, watching pangolins walk around, they don't, as far as I know, they don't habitually walk around on 2 feet.
Yeah,
like they're quadrupedal animals, but they can do that little waddle with the front feet up, and that long tail out the back.
Yeah,
where they've got a little bit of the armadillo thing, even though it's a very different structure.
Yes.
Like we've talked on the podcast that there are a number of groups that have osteoderms, skin, bones, like crocs do, like some lizards do. Armadillos have that. Armadillos, glyptodons, ground sloths had that. In pangolins, they're not osteoderms. They're just keratin sheets. So it's not a bone in the skin like in those others. So they're doing their own version of that. They've got the anteater thing, but they're also climbers.
Yeah.
So they're also a bit like possums.
Yes.
With that long tail.
And when they walk around on the back legs, it's one of my favorite things about them because that makes them one of the few, like, one of the only mammals I can think of that is using a balance system like a theropod dinosaur.
Yeah, with the long tail out behind them to help them keep that posture.
Yeah, instead of standing upright, which is what a lot of bipedal mammals do.
Like a kangaroo.
Like us and kangaroos and gorillas when they do it and bears when they do it. You put your center of mass over your feet, and that way you can walk around.
Yeah, the whole body is just sort of straight up.
Here, you're balancing your front portion with a long tail, which is what predatory dinosaurs did and other bipedal dinosaurs did. And that's not a common thing anymore.
Yeah. Well, and they are predatory.
Yes.
Which is very fun. They're like ants and termites and stuff they're going after.
But, like, that is not a common body plan anymore today. Like, we don't just have that as a common way of moving around.
Yeah.
Like, I guess lizards that run around periodically on their back legs.
Sure. But even then...
I don't know. Are you just falling forward fast and running fast enough to stay upright? Like, are you actually balancing?
Yeah, and I don't know. I'm sure there is a component of balance, but it isn't that, like, straight line of the body.
Yeah, just that perfect seesaw.
Yeah, exactly. The lizards, when they run, I'm thinking, like, frilled lizards. It is more of an upright stance that they're putting themselves in.
And once again, that's a thing that you came to convergently. So it's just, they have some extremely odd features compared to the rest of it, at least mammals today, but even broader life today, that they did not get from the other groups who that's also weird.
Yeah. Well, and it makes them feel very distinctive. Like bats, like kangaroos. Kangaroos are another, where this is a group of animals that there really isn't very much that's like them.
Yep.
And the things that are kind of like them are not closely related to them. They are their own weird lineage of life doing their own weird thing.
It's very intriguing. They've also got one of my other favorite animal fun facts, which is their tongue is so long that the base of it anchors at their ribs near the pelvis.
Yeah, most animals, the tongue is anchored to the hyoid bones.
Yes.
In the throat. And in pangolins, it's such a long and powerful tongue that it is anchored deeper down in the body cavity.
Yep.
Near the bones of the chest.
And, like, that's insane. That's such a long tongue.
It's super cool.
Like, what? How is that necessary? How do you need that?
Well, it was that or do the woodpecker thing, where the tongue wraps around the skull.
Yes. Yep. Oh, yeah. They're very, very cool.
They're extremely cool animals. And there's more than I always think there. I think I made this mistake on the podcast at one point, where I referred to pangolins as one species.
Yes.
That there is one, like tuataras or a lot of those other weird groups. But there are several species of pangolins, and they're found across multiple continents. And I want to say there are some that aren't shingled.
Yeah, or at least less so.
Yeah.
Like, you can see skin.
So there's diversity. It isn't just one weird species like red pandas or tuataras. One or maybe two, depending on the thing.
Yes.
Like, no, there's a diversity of pangolins, which always takes me by surprise when I'm reminded of that.
Absolutely, because it's very easy to think of them as an animal that is so weird that surely that only worked once.
Right.
Because, there's other animals out there that have that, like the eye, where it's like, there's not a bunch of species of eye. You are a very particularly weird species. Pangolins feel like that, but are actually a group. So being that weird is successful.
Yeah. I don't know. I know there is a fossil record of pangolins, although I don't know very much about it.
No, me neither.
And I doubt we have any good fossils of their armor.
Yes.
Because again, it's not bony armor, it's keratin armor. So I assume we don't know very much about it, although I don't, off the top of my head, know anything about the pangolin fossil record.
Yeah. And so, that would be very interesting to learn about. I wonder if how recent they are, because it might be one of those where if it's not a very long fossil record, we might not have many chances to get a one that preserves soft tissue or something.
Yeah, and they are a group that it wouldn't surprise me if they are like a lot of weird groups where we just have very little to go on. But it also wouldn't surprise me to learn that we have a surprisingly good fossil record of these. There was some animal we talked about on the podcast not too long ago. Oh, it was file snakes.
Oh, yeah.
Where it was like, yeah, this one weird group that is utterly bizarre has an incredible fossil record. Yeah, that wouldn't. I would not be surprised either way. I was just looking because I just had the thought that I don't know off the top of my head what a pangolin skull looks like, and I was wondering if they look like anteaters. Because an anteater's skull. This is something that comes up when people at the museum will point at a tapir and guess that it is an anteater.
Yes.
Because it's got that long nose. And that always makes me not chuckle. I'm not being a jerk about it. But like it's amusing to me to think that these are two animals that both have long faces. But structurally completely different.
Yeah, not even remotely the same.
A tapir skull looks like a horse skull. That long face is all lips and tissue. An anteater skull is a long tube. Pangolins, I'm looking at a picture... they're kind of tubular.
Yeah, they definitely are longer.
They're kind of a long, but it's not the anteater shape.
It's possum again. It's kind of possumy, just without teeth.
Yes.
You know, just minus the teeth. So they have a fairly average looking skull. You know, it's definitely specialized, but not nearly as, quote unquote distorted.
And looking at the images, they've got those powerful arms with big claws, like we see in a lot of climbers. And this is another thing that I'm sort of reflecting on looking at this skeleton. It's weird to see a mammal skeleton with such a long, powerful tail.
That's all, like, back to when they were walking, that was the part of the reason.
That looks like a reptile tail.
Yes, it does.
The big vertebrae, it's very long. Mammal tails often feel like they're tacked on to the end of the body.
Yep.
Or the end of the skeleton. Even like big poofy tails like a cat or something. The actual bones tend to be pretty small and thin.
Yes, and with tails like that, they're typically not very musculatured.
Yep.
You know, they can move, like a cat's tail is mobile, and they can use it for balance, and they can use it to, communicate and whatnot. So, like, it's not a uncomplex tail. It's got lots that it can do.
But it's not a robust tail.
Yeah, they can't hold weight with it or, balance their body's weight or hold on to anything. And even tails that do have more muscle to them, like some climbing monkeys, that's a very robust tail compared to the body. Well,
yes.
I don't feel that from the skeletons I've seen of monkeys, I don't feel like that it even looks the same. Yeah, they have a very unmammal-like tail compared to the average one.
They are quite reptilian feeling in that sense.
Yeah, which just makes them all the better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the best way for a mammal to be.
You're scaly.
You're covered in scales. You've got big claws.
Yeah.
You're climbing trees with your big muscular tail. You're basically a lizard.
Yes. And so, good on you.
Yeah, and of course those tails, that's what they're doing with those tails.
Yes.
These are... I don't actually know off the top of my head how prehensile... I don't know if a pangolin can hang from the tail.
Some can. I think there is one that's particularly arboreal.
That sounds like it makes sense.
Because like and I don't remember the different species if they have different names, but the biggest one I think spends a lot of... It can climb really well, but it spends more of its time down. There is one with a notably long tail that is very arboreal, and I've seen videos of it hanging from its tail.
Cool.
And just
like very possum-like.
Twisting around and stuff and being able to maneuver its body quite a bit just with the tail.
Yeah.
And so, absolutely.
Yeah, pangolins are one of those groups of animals that you look at it and you can see why they are as endangered as they are.
Yeah.
Pangolins, I've heard it said many times, pangolins are the most trafficked species of wildlife.
Yep.
They are extremely... I mean, they're widespread.
Yes.
There's a number of species of them. But pangolins are heavily threatened by human activities and very commonly trafficked. And it's one of those animals, kind of like tigers, like a lot of others, where you look at it and you're like, I get it. I totally understand why humans are fascinated with this particular type of animal. Because they are super cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at the Wikipedia page, and there's a picture on the Wikipedia page of like a suit of armor.
Yes.
Like an ornamented, I don't know if it's like a armor, or if I think it's maybe just ornamental, but it is gilded pangolin scales
made
into a suit of armor. And I saw it and I was like, oh, that's cool. Oh, that's not cool.
Yep.
I see the aesthetic appeal of something like that, and then I am sad about it.
Yep, I had that when I got to see a banjo or a guitar made out of a sea turtle shell.
Oh yeah,
and it had that same thing of like, boy, that'd be cool for like a D&D character to have.
Yeah, it was like that would be awesome if it was like 3D printed.
Yep.
I scanned a turtle
Yes.
shell and I 3D printed and made it into a guitar.
Yeah.
It is significantly less awesome that it's made out of an actual
That I'm actually holding.
that's actually the animal.
Yep. And it also is a shame for them that they're not like itty bitty mouse sized or anything, but they are not big animals.
Mm-mm.
And so and they've got their defense, they've got their armor, and I'm sure those claws wouldn't feel good if they got them into you. But if you just scoop one up by the tail and put it into it, like, there's not much they can do once a person has found them.
Yeah.
So it's very easy for, I'm sure, people just to scoop them up by...
Because they're not very fast. I get the impression they're not very fast.
Not from what I've seen.
Their defense is they curl up.
Yes.
Which is another very cool thing that pangolins do. They are one of 2 groups of mammals that do that. The pangolins and armadillos.
Yeah. And they just can wrap that tail around them and become this little shingled ball.
Yeah, I've seen images and maybe videos of like lions or other predators like coming across the little curled up pangolin and not quite knowing what to do with it, or like poking at it or investigating it. I read somewhere that maybe some of them sleep like that.
Oh, that makes sense.
Which A, makes sense, and B, that's adorable.
That's so cute.
And it makes me it adds to the image of this creature as this very strange, like mythical. It makes me think of the scene in Frozen.
Yeah.
Where the trolls are all boulders.
Yes.
And then all the boulders come to life.
Yeah.
Just a bunch of pangolins that look like they're just rocks. And then they are pine cones or something.
Yep.
And then I don't know if they have pine cones where I don't know how much overlap there is between pangolins and pine trees, but something like that.
Yeah.
It's just an inanimate, odd part of the environment, and they all start uncurling, and the pangolins come up.
It feels like a scene from like a sci-fi movie where you come in and there's all of these scaly plants that then unfurl and turn out to be animals.
Yeah.
Which, very cool defense. Once again, though, feels like that doesn't help when we show up.
That doesn't help with humans.
We are very experienced with balls. Like, putting them into baskets. That's kind of what we do.
Yeah, we made a whole habit out of that.
Yep, like we've done that in just about as many ways as you can do that activity. Vertically, horizontally.
We like spheres.
We put the nets on sticks.
Humans are fans. Sometimes you got to put it in the net with your hands, and then sometimes you hold the net.
Yep,
and you got to move it with the net.
I always feel so bad when I see animals like that, of like, you are so cool and you're so good at what you do if we weren't around, but
yes,
none of what you do is going to be able to even remotely stop us.
No.
And
because like tenacious.
There's some animals that it's like, yeah, no, you can fly away from us or something, or like,
right.
There's plenty of animals that have,
or you're a tiger.
You're a tiger,
like,
or you're venomous, or you've got something that we. None of your things are a problem for us. So it's just, it's like poaching you, I'm sure, is like grocery shopping, and that's a shame.
It is a real shame. Well, KitKat, pangolins, super cool.
So
awesome
cool.
Suggestion. We haven't done an episode about pangolins on the podcast as of this recording, and someday, surely, perhaps we shall.
I hope so, because I want to learn more about them.
I would love to. Yeah, I don't know anything about pangolins. I know very little about pangolins.
Yeah,
I know them by reputation more than I actually know any scientific information about them.
And I know that they've got some of the other things that like anteaters have, with their digestive system being
and
weird.
The tongue is like sticky in the way that anteater tongues are sticky, I think.
So they've got a bunch of other peculiar anatomy that I am less familiar with.
Yeah, pangolins definitely feel like chimeras in the sense of they looked at all across the animal diversity and picked their favorite attributes and went, I will have these from over here, and this is the skill tree of animal evolution, and pangolins went, I'm gonna pick and choose, they're gonna combine all the best stuff.
Well, and they always they elicit the same thought that a lot of other unusual members of a group do for me, of if you were the group that ends up surviving an extinction, or for some reason are the main the first animals from Earth that another alien race or something encounters, that you would skew their expectation for mammals.
This is not what the rest of them are like.
And so like if they survived and then diversified, you have that thing where future people would have to be saying what we always say of like, the normal now is not what it used to be.
Yes.
They all used to have wimpy tails and very little armor.
Oh man, this is how you get another Age of Dinosaurs.
Yeah.
It's just pangolin descendants.
Yeah. Oh man, I want fan art of that now, of like pangolin sauropods and pangolin.
Ooh.
Right?
All right, listen, maybe we'll do this as a project someday. A whole pangolin series. KitKat, thank you so much for this suggestion.
This was a lot of fun.
This is a very fun conversation, and of course, a huge thank you for your incredible support of us on Patreon, and as a listener, we greatly appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
More episodes to come in the future. We hope that you continue to enjoy and continue to stick with us through our various science-y antics. Thank you again. Sign off, Race.
Bye!
Thanks for listening to the Common Descent podcast. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and check our WordPress blog for pictures and links after each episode. Huge thanks to our patrons whose support helps keep this podcast running and who get access to bonus goodies on Patreon. The song you're hearing is called On the Origin of Species by Protodome, which we found at ocremix.org. Thanks again for listening. We hope you'll join us next time.